Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please open up our agenda for our meeting September 25th, 2024 for the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners, and let's begin by doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, citizen input this morning. I don't believe no one in the room has signed up for citizen input. Stephen, do we have any raised? No one raised on,
Hey.
okay. Well, that's unusual. Okay. The end of September. All right. So then let us go to our consent. Oh, I do want to acknowledge something though, before we start our meeting. I don't know if you were listening to the radio this morning, but one of our Deschutes County employees was just honored. Andrea Abramson was named the 2024 Juvenile Justice Professional of the Year for Central and Eastern Oregon region by the Oregon Juvenile Department Directors Association. She has worked in our county's juvenile department for more than 30 years, helping young people who need both formal and informal supervision. She is known for her compassion and for the positive healing impact she has on others. And I actually left her a phone message. It said she was out in training and there isn't any chance that she was able to get on Zoom, is there, Stephen? I did say if you could join us on Zoom, we were going to acknowledge your all that you give to our community. She's not here. Okay, so she'll probably pick up that message later today and said she was available after 12:30. So anyway, congratulations. Thank you so much for being part of our successful program working with youth. So on to our consent agenda.
I'll move approval of our consent agenda.
And I will second it.
Okay, the only comment I would love to acknowledge is the fact that in consent is the approval of a document for a 16-bed secure residential treatment facility to be run, and I believe it's should be located in Redmond. And this is great news. We're receiving a $2 million pass-through from this Oregon Health Authority. So something our community has been asking for a long time. It was awarded to, there were only 2 applications and it was awarded. So thank you very much for having that in our consent. So for the vote, Commissioner Chang
Yes.
and Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
I could just further make a comment that I am so excited to see this partnership with Jackson House and County Behavioral Health moving forward, and where $2 million from the state plus private sector investment can get us to the point where we're building and can operate this much needed secure residential treatment facility in our community.
Thank you. And thank you, Holly, for, as I say, Holly's patience.
Mhm.
And hard work.
Yes, patience, follow through.
Mm.
Thank you very much. All right, so then let's go to action item number 8. And that is recognition of 20-year service awards to Melinda Campbell and Toby Condell. I'm sure they want to come up. Yes. And we know that this is why the TV is here.
For you.
All right, Tanya Mahood, for the record, IT Director and CTO here at the county. I personally want to thank Melinda for 20 years of service at the county. Over the past 2 decades, Melinda has worn many hats, starting as a GIS analyst and later taking on the role of an application analyst. She's played a key role in several large projects, including the
Grab the mic a little closer.
Oh.
including the onboarding of our agenda management software and the Tyler ERP rollout, which everyone uses here. And she has continued to provide exceptional front end and back end support of our Tyler ERP system here at the county. She's become our go-to expert for the AV equipment in this room. If you didn't already see her, already doing some troubleshooting over there, and helping to make sure that this room runs as smoothly as possible. And Melinda's been involved in several countywide committees, which has really shown her dedication and determination to make change here at the county. So this is a really great achievement, and we thank you, Melinda.
All right. It is my pleasure to honor Toby for his incredible 20 years of service here at Deschutes County. Toby, you've been an essential part of our team, and your contributions over the years have been nothing short of remarkable. Your vast knowledge of our data systems and your ability to navigate complicated databases have been invaluable, from setting up and maintaining our county's data warehouse to your pivotal work on the DIAL project, where you successfully compiled data from multiple complex systems. Your expertise has made a significant impact. One of your standout achievements is developing a process to import data from the Department of Corrections for the Community Justice Department, significantly improving their capacity for data-driven decision-making and serving as a model for other counties across the state. And of course, your quick work pulling information from the Oregon Health Authority and making COVID data accessible for our dashboard during the pandemic was crucial to keeping our community safe and informed. But beyond your technical accomplishments, you're known for being a true team player. You're always willing to jump in and do whatever is asked of you, and your peers hold you in the highest regard. You're well-liked, respected, and trusted by everyone who has had the pleasure of working with you. Plus, we can't forget to mention your bowling prowess,
Bowling.
which has made you bowling royalty at the county league events.
Here we go.
300 games?
15.
15 of them?
Hey,
Oh, my gosh.
there it is.
Impressive.
Toby, thank you for your dedication and commitment to Deschutes County. We are incredibly grateful for all that you've done and look forward to many more years of working alongside you. Congratulations on 20 fantastic years.
Thank you both.
Linda, what sport do you do then?
Now's your opportunity. Microphone's available.
Okay, well, anyway, that's pretty impressive. 15, 300 games. I can't imagine. So
It's also coaches bowling team.
And travels to Las Vegas for
Oh,
tournaments
you
and
go.
all across the country. So, yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you both. Remember, Melinda, when I got started, I kind of went and said hi, and that was my world before, I became a commissioner, was computers, technology, and the data. And I have seen the packages, come and go in the last 14 years or so. Just amazing, all the data that we do need to organize, stay on top of, systems available every day. I just think about the big iceberg effect. There's a lot of going on behind these systems, especially I think of the dial systems, just amazing that it's available and there's so much information and it's up to date. So thank you very much for your efforts and the efforts of the whole team, but congratulations on 20 years. Thank you.
And if I could just say, any of us reflecting on the evolution of information technology over the last 20 years, this is an incredibly rapidly changing world. And, I just wanted to thank you both for helping to lay the foundations for our IT systems here at the county and helping us keep up with that rapid change over time. And we are one of the most secure, most technologically efficient and advanced counties in the state. And that goes to the work of everyone at the IT department, but especially the leaders and long-term workers. Thank you.
So we're going to take.
Photo opportunity.
Okay. Thank you, Kim.
Oh, here we go. There we go.
Scooch in here, guys. There you go, there you go. Perfect. All right. 1, 2, 3. All right, cool, thank you.
Very nice.
Let's now go to item number 9. Is Pam? Is Chandra on? Okay,
Should be remote. There we go.
all right, thank you.
Chandra, were you going to present the item?
There we go.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
For the record, I'm Chandra Mola, Behavioral Health Medical Team Manager, and I'm here today to request consideration to add a 1.0 FTE for a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. This position would replace a full-time psych nurse practitioner that was contracted through Iris Telehealth. Whereas contracted telehealth providers have been a necessary option to cover essential services during chronic vacancies, in-person providers are preferred. In-person providers can better integrate into our teams. They provide leadership and medical guidance, which leads to better patient care. They also live and work in our community and participate in our local economy. I'm requesting to decrease our current Iris Telehealth contract by $254,687 and then applying those funds to create this 1.0 FTE.
It's actually excellent news. Thank you for meeting with us earlier. It's truly a win-win. I'm really relieved that we were able to hire this position and someone that will be local. So thank you. Great job.
Thanks.
And I know that over the years, yeah, we've had resources for this service. We have need for this service, and telehealth was kind of the only option. And being able to transition to local employment, local representation is going to be valuable for anybody involved.
I'm really glad that we can essentially onshore this workforce capacity and bring it home to our community. Yeah, and take it away from Texas, frankly. So thank you for doing that.
With that, I'll move approval of resolution 2024-044, adding 1.0 regular duration FTE within the 24-25 Deschutes County budget.
Second.
Any further discussion? Has that person been, you do have someone in the community perhaps that's going to, yes.
I
That's
do.
really wonderful news. So
Yeah.
thank you. For the vote, Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Here we go.
So now we are at item number 10 on our agenda.
Morning, Commissioners. Laura Skundrick, Management Analyst with Finance, and I'm here today with
proposed fee schedule amendments from several departments, proposing either new or revised fees. Last week, we presented these to you during your September 16th work session. And the board was supportive of moving forward to the next step, which is holding a public hearing and considering the resolution. So we're back here today. As a quick reminder, the proposed changes include 3 departments: Health Services, Information Technology, and Community Development, which all attended last week's session and answered any questions that you had. And the proposed changes are outlined in your materials again today, with a proposed effective date of October 1st for Health and IT and November 1st for CDD. So we're available if you have any additional questions today. Otherwise, we can go ahead and open the public hearing when you're ready.
Okay, any questions for Laura?
Just acknowledging this is kind of, mid-cycle from our annual fee schedule. There's reasons for each one of these, and some of them are truly just cost of doing business and our health plan internally, but also capturing fees for services provided.
So let's go ahead and then open the public hearing at this time. I don't have any blue forms from anyone in the room that wanted to testify. Stephen, is anyone online to testify on the public hearing for our fee increases? You see none? Okay, all right. So then let's go ahead and we will close the public hearing. Is there any further discussion?
Just acknowledging that I'm sensitive to the cost of construction for a, single family home, and there's some analysis on that also. As I say, these seem to be prudent fee changes in the environment we're in. This year kind of feels like it's been a little bit of a rocky road for, developers and permitting processes. But this is dialing in those fees. So as I say, I'm sensitive to the cost of construction though.
No one wants to raise fees, but for the county to be able to provide excellent service to the community, we need to have excellent employees, and historically offering a quality health insurance health package is a really important part of being able to recruit and retain those excellent people.
So do we, therefore, after those comments, do we have a motion?
I will move approval of resolution number 2024-045 to amend the Deschutes County 2024-25 fee schedule and adopt new and revised fees within health services, information technology, and the community development departments.
I will second it.
Is there any further discussion? Well, inflation, it keeps popping up. So it's unfortunate that we had to raise our fee. If this passes, we have to raise our fees again. I know we kept it as low as we could with this, but it's still asking for more money. So definitely it's reaching into people's pockets. So calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So thank you, Laura.
You.
We are now at item number 11. I believe Nicole.
Good morning, commissioners. For the record, Nicole Mardell, Senior Planner with Deschutes County Community Development. I apologize, I'm just looking around the room to make sure the applicant is here for this hearing.
Because we're a little early.
We are a little early, so Stephen, do you see Ken Kapsroff? Okay. I might, if it's amenable to the board, I might check to see if he's in the lobby. So maybe we could take a 5-minute or so recess.
Sure.
Perfect.
Let's take a 5-minute recess.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
The applicant here, so we can.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Wait just a minute. Are we out of the recess? Okay, we're good now.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. Apologies for the inconvenience there. We do have the applicant here in the room, so we can begin the hearing on item 11 pertaining to Highway 97 mini storage text amendments. And I'll turn it over to Chair to read the script to open the hearing.
Yes, this is the time and place set for a hearing regarding file numbers 247-23-000-732-TA. The hearing relates to an applicant-initiated text amendment to allow mini storage as a conditional use in the multiple use agricultural MUA 10 zone in certain areas along Highway 97. Staff will outline the hearing procedures that will be followed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So the project website and full record is shown at the link here, which is deschutes.org/highway 97 storage. Today, the Board of County Commissioners will take testimony and receive written evidence concerning the proposed text amendment. The hearing is also being recorded. The hearing will be conducted in the following order. Staff will provide a brief presentation. The applicant, Schwabe, Williamson, and Wyatt, will present their testimony and evidence, aiming for a 30-minute time limit. Agencies, if present, will then provide their testimony with a 10-minute limit per agency, and then interested persons can provide their testimony, aiming for a 3-minute time limit. Following testimony, the Commission may request the applicant or staff answer any additional questions or may allow the applicant to provide rebuttal testimony. This is a hybrid public hearing with both in-person and remote participation options. Before starting your testimony, please provide your first and last name as well as your mailing address so we can add you to the notification list. For our in-person participants, if you wish to testify, please fill out a blue sign-up sheet and submit it to the board's executive assistant, Brenda, to the left of the dais. Chair Adair will then call up in-person participants for their testimony, and please make sure to speak into the microphone as well. For our remote participants, if you wish to testify, you must be logged into Zoom or have used the Zoom dial-in option. When the chair asks if anyone would like to testify, you'll need to use the raise hand feature to notify the board. To do this, you need to press the raise hand button on your computer or smart device, or if you called in, dial *9. In addition to oral testimony, if anyone has written testimony, you can provide that to me, or you can email that to me at nicole.mardell@deschutes.org. The chair and staff are responsible for conducting an orderly hearing. Any testimony or behavior which is inappropriate will be addressed and may result in that member of the public being removed from the hearing. Questions to and from the chair may be entertained anytime at the chair's discretion. Cross-examination of people testifying will not be allowed. However, if any person wishes to ask a question of another during that person's testimony, please direct your question to the chair after being recognized. The chair is free to decide whether or not to ask such questions of the person testifying. Prior to commencement of the hearing, any party may challenge the qualifications of any commissioner for conflict of interest. This challenge must be documented with specific reasons supported by facts. Should any commissioner be challenged, the member may disqualify himself or herself, withdraw from the hearing, or make a statement on the record of their capacity to hear and decide this issue.
Does any commissioner have anything to disclose? And if so, please state the nature of same and whether you can proceed.
I have none,
And you can proceed.
and I can proceed.
I have none and I can proceed.
And I have none and I can proceed. Okay. Does any party wish to challenge any commissioner, member of the hearings body based on conflicts of interest? Is there anyone with a raised hand on Zoom, Stephen? No? Seeing none, the hearing is now open. Staff will proceed with a brief staff report.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So as noted, I'll provide a pretty brief staff report as the applicant will provide a more extensive one. But just wanted to note this is an applicant-initiated text amendment. So a little bit different than some of our typical text amendments that are proposed by staff. The applicant is seeking to change Title 1832 of the Deschutes County Code related to the multiple use agricultural zone to allow mini storage as conditional use subject to certain criteria. Those being if the property is within 2,500 feet of an urban growth boundary and adjacent to Highway 97 and at least 10 acres in size and no greater than 30 acres in size, and multiple parcels could be utilized to meet that minimum acreage requirement. Additionally, a new criteria was added at the Planning Commission level from the applicant that did vary from the original proposal, and that was to exclude properties in the urban reserve area from being eligible. So properties that are within, for instance, the Redmond Urban Reserve area, even if they meet all those other kind of conditions, would not be eligible for mini storage development. Wanted to note that this is a separate proposal from the Highway 20 text amendment that you heard last month. There are quite a few similarities, but wanted to note that they are separate, distinct records and hearing processes. As this is a conditional use proposal, wanted to note that Chapter 18-128 of the Deschutes County Code would also apply related to conditional uses. So this would require development projects to address certain compatibility requirements. For instance, is the use compatible with the surrounding environment? Could be more discretion and review from staff of adding additional criteria. And there are some additional requirements specific to mini storage in that title. So some square footage maximums on individual spaces, limitations on outdoor storage, some screening requirements, parking requirements, and there's also an allowance for an on-site caretaker residence as well.
So just for clarity, you're saying those are existing conditional use aspects that are in the code, not part of this application per se, though. I mean, they're just already there.
Correct. They're currently existing and would apply in
Yep.
addition to those siting criteria.
I want to confirm. Thank you.
Good question. Wanted to note, originally there were 50 properties that were eligible based on those siting criteria. With the addition of that criterion to exclude properties in the Redmond Urban Reserve area, which is shown here in yellow, that reduced the eligible properties down to 37. So here you can see a couple maps. They're a bit larger in your packet, but the first is an area north of City of Bend. The second is the area south of City of Redmond. And the third is this area north of Redmond here. And again, that yellow property is now excluded. Just a bit of background, we currently allow mini storage in Deschutes County in several zones, primarily in our unincorporated communities. So it's allowed in Terrebonne, Tumalo, Sun River, and also in our rural commercial and rural industrial districts. Primarily, it's allowed as a conditional use with the exception of the Tumalo Industrial Zone, in which it's allowed through the site plan review process. But pretty common to see some additional compatibility requirements in these districts and square footage maximums on mini storage development. Wanted to, excuse me, also note some of the existing approvals that we have in Deschutes County. So we have 8 facilities that we could find from our research that were approved and currently operational in the rural county. 5 were approved prior to our modern code. So in the 1980s and 90s is when they received approval. 1 caretaker residence was approved in Sun River. And kind of the breakdown by zoning is that 3 are in our rural service center, of which now it's prohibited to develop a mini storage facility there due to some code changes. But the rest are in the Sun River Business Park, Tumalo Industrial District, Terrebonne Commercial District, and 2 in the rural industrial zone. Those are on Deschutes Pleasant Ridge Road in the Deschutes Junction area. Wanted to also note, we did receive 3 agency comments. So of course, as I noted, a comment from City of Redmond expressing concern regarding properties in the urban reserve area. So the applicant did add that criterion to address that comment from City of Redmond. It's our understanding that that did appease their concerns. So we haven't received any further comment from City of Redmond. We received a comment from the county transportation planner, just noting that if this text amendment were to move forward, and were approved, there would be some additional requirements at the time of site-specific development related to traffic impacts and parking, things like that. We also received a comment from ODOT asking some additional information regarding transportation planning rule findings and a trip generation estimate, and that was provided by the applicant. We also received public comments. We received 2 written comments and 1 oral comment at the public hearing at the Planning Commission level, primarily expressing concern regarding compatibility with the MUA 10 zone purpose statement and with neighboring uses. So concern about impacts to residential properties nearby or also farm. We also received concern regarding scenic view impacts and the EC, Economic, Social, Environmental, and Energy Review
that was provided by the applicant, as Highway 97 is a scenic corridor in the county's landscape management zone, concern about the impact of mini storage development on that resource, and some discussion about whether or not this is an urban use occurring on rural land. So if some commenters noted that the intensity of mini storage development is that like you'd see in a city industrial zone. So therefore, it may not be fitting on rural properties unless there's an exception taken to Goal 14, which relates to those urban uses on rural lands. The Planning Commission held a hearing on this item on July 11th and deliberated on August 8th. They voted 4-0 to recommend approval of the proposed amendment. Specifically, they noted that there were pretty minor traffic and visual impacts associated with this development, in particular less impactful in their view than others allowed in the zone, such as a bed and breakfast or a veterinary clinic. They felt it provides a transition between city limits and urban growth boundary development and the rural county. It could be potentially also transitional use for a property to develop while they're waiting to be incorporated into an urban growth boundary. They felt that the conditional use process provides for additional opportunity for input from residents, and with the ability to add some additional conditions, there could be ability to mitigate any concerns at a subsequent step, not necessarily through this text amendment process. And they also noted that this use is already allowed in other zones in Deschutes County. So although case law is a bit ambiguous on whether or not this is an urban or rural use, we already allow it in several other zones. As I mentioned at the hearing last month, there was a bit of a different vote based on the planning commissioners who were in attendance. So again, just wanted to note for the record that for the Highway 20 proposal, the vote was 3-2 to deny the proposed amendment, which is quite similar to this one. And so the planning commission wanted me to note that there was a different makeup of the planning commission during review of these two applications. So they wanted to note that there, generally was kind of some differentiation in how those votes went. In terms of next steps, the board has several options to move forward. You could choose to continue the hearing to a date and time certain, to close the hearing and leave the written record open to a date certain, close the hearing and set a date for deliberations, or close the hearing and commence deliberations. And with that, I welcome any questions.
Nicole, I do have a question. You said we have approved 8 in Deschutes County, but now because we've changed, 3 of them would no longer be approved.
That's a great question, Commissioner.
Well, it's not great, but I want to understand this.
I appreciate the clarification. Yeah, so the county went through periodic review to incorporate some case law regarding urban unincorporated communities and urban uses on rural lands. So the Rural Service Center District went through quite a bit of an overhaul in the kind of the 90s and early 2000s. So these development projects were approved prior to that code overhaul. And mini storage, I wasn't able to find an exact reason in the history. For some reason was just removed as a use. So those are essentially non-conforming uses that are allowed to continue to operate, but you wouldn't be allowed to, develop a mini storage facility on vacant land in a rural service center today.
Thank you.
And I mean, that is not that's not such an unusual situation. I mean, there's a lot of things that exist in the county that are, grandfathered in that you would not be allowed to build today. And nobody's taking away those people's property rights to have created that thing at the time that it was created.
Okay.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, we could move on to the.
I have one more sort of kind of procedural or process question. So these are legislative amendments that are being proposed, and you've already mentioned the way that this proposal and the Highway 20 proposal have similarities and distinctions between them. Because this is a legislative amendment proposal, there's not as much of we don't have to keep these two things in silos as much as we might with a land use application. Is that correct?
That's correct. In consultation with legal counsel, we tried to avoid having, for instance, both hearings on the same day, just in case there was like some confusion in what's in which record. So I think our goal is to try to ensure that each record is separate. But I think, because to your point, because it is legislative, you do have some flexibility there. If there was a desire, for instance, for me to enter in any information from the Highway 20 process, I could do that upon your request. But otherwise, unless Stephanie Marshall, our legal counsel, had any other items to add, I think you do have a little bit more flexibility than with a quasi judicial proposal.
Good morning. Not on? How's that on?
It's probably on.
Green light.
Okay. Hello? Oh,
It
there
is
you
on.
go. Much better.
Oh.
Stephanie Marshall, Senior Assistant Legal Counsel. Yes, Nicole is correct. The challenge that could come up is when the board is preparing its findings, and because you're going to want to circle back to what's in the record before you. So to the extent that you're relying on information, testimony, documents in the other record, we'd want to, be able to point to that. And Nicole mentioned, getting those other materials into this record. But I think that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to kind of maybe jump ahead a little bit, the thing that I'm particularly interested in is the difference in the way that lands that our cities are interested in urbanizing in the future are being addressed in these two proposals. For the city of Redmond, we have an urban area reserve. I like that. If this amendment moves forward on Highway 97, the urban area reserve areas will be excluded. And the city of Bend doesn't have really have an urban area reserve at this moment. They've expressed an intention to create that because they are picturing future urbanization of areas out, immediately outside the urban growth boundary. And I want to be sure that we honor that intent to allow cities to preserve areas for future urbanization when we get to the Highway 20 amendment.
Understood, Commissioner Chang. So in that regard, one of your findings, should the board decide on 20, which is not before you today, not to approve that one, and maybe let's just say for argument's sake that the board did decide to approve this one, that would be a finding that you could make, not necessarily referencing the Highway 97 application, but referencing the fact that you have a concern regarding future expansion of the urban growth boundary and how that could impact future changes.
Could that, short of the city of Bend, hurrying up and creating the urban area reserve, I mean, could there be conditions created that address this consideration? If this is allowed, when we get to Highway 20, if this is allowed under code, there is certain could we create certain kinds of conditions for consultation and approval by the adjacent city?
Well, I think that's a fair question, but because the matter before you today is the Highway 97, I think let's just table that and circle back at the next hearing.
If staff could start thinking about that at this point, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
No, and at the time that we allowed, you did say 30, 10, if there are any agencies, and then 3.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So would the applicant like to come up?
Morning, Commissioners. For the record, Ken Katzroff. I'm an attorney with Schwab, Williamson and Wyatt. Address is 360 Southwest Bond, Suite 500, Bend, Oregon 97702. Before I give some brief remarks, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Aaron Lafke, who's going to chat with you briefly.
I'll be considerably less formal. Aaron Lafke, we own some of the properties within this proposed impacted area of the text amendment, generally located on the west side of Highway 97, centered around Suzanne Lane, named after my wife. The Kramer family originally purchased the property in, I believe, 1970. And I just wanted to address one issue before Ken takes over, and that is that early on in the process last year, and I think maybe August, as we talked to staff, there was concerns about that the impact of this type of thing on rural lands. And so I'll be specific to that issue, and that when we first started this experiment with land use in the 70s, this was rural property. That was before the Bend River Mall. That was before the Mountain View Mall. That was before Home Depot. It was before the highway went from a simple 2-lane road to essentially 5 lanes with the decibel levels near the same as Portland Airport. We used to have cows until the cars slid off the road so much that went through the fence and the cows were out on the highway. So Tom the pony got run over, and Bob and Jerry and Phil, the cows, all had to be led back across the highway with grain. It's lost its rural character. And now we have a significant encampment across the highway from us. We have mobile home parks. We have Juniper Ridge. And in regard to the encampment, it's not just a fire issue, as we've seen recently. I woke up at about 3:30 in the morning a couple of weeks ago to the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office calling me because evidently known residents of Dirt World had entered our property, and deputies were trying to clarify if they could get into our property and who might be residing on our property at this time in homes that we have. We granted them access, and they pursued the suspects, and this chase had been going on for hours. And by the morning light, we discovered that one of our homes had the front door kicked in. We have spent considerable amount of time and money during the last few years dealing with trespass issues and squatters, where we had one event last year where it was a guns drawn eviction by the sheriff's office on our property. So we've run into a lot of difficulty with the general change from its rural character to what it is now. And we saw this as an opportunity to have an economically viable opportunity that would allow us to have security and the types of things that would secure the property itself from the impacts that are happening around us. And to speak to your concern, Mr. Chang, self-storage or boat and RV storage are considered to be good in terms of it. They can become other things. In other words, there's not a massive capital investment that can't be changed to other uses in the future. So boat and RV storage obviously could become other things as land use changes over time. So thank you.
Yeah, I guess in response to that, I would just say I appreciate that. And I think we should leave it up to the cities who want to urbanize these areas, whether they believe that it's kind of a transitional use that could be shifted to something else in the future, or whether they would like to keep it open for future urbanization.
Right, but keeping it open has resulted in some very difficult times and put a real burden on us as property owners to deal with. I mean, just the simple U-turns that are happening
No,
right now.
Mr. Lafke, I completely understand your argument that the character of the area has changed. What we are talking about today is completely changing the meaning of what multiple use agriculture zoning is. And I know that you've tried to kind of corral that a little bit by saying, within 2,500 feet of an urban growth boundary, but urban growth boundaries move. So we're not just talking about the the properties that are within 2,500 feet of the urban growth boundary today, we are talking about a constantly evolving set of properties. And we are talking about changing the what multiple use agriculture zoning means for all of those properties in the future. Now, if your argument is, the character of this area has changed, this is not farmland, then you are completely welcome to pursue a rezone of individual specific properties. And Mr. Katzroff has done that numerous times in the last couple of years in near proximity to the urban growth boundaries of Bend and Redmond. And so that is an entirely feasible option for you to proceed with the change of use or the change of allowable uses that you are interested in.
Well, and thank you for your comments. I just would respectfully disagree. I mean, we are not trying to change the character of the MUA zone. We're simply adding a conditional use that would go through a very significant process that is not very different from many other conditional uses that are already in the MUA 10 zone. So, and I think if you're talking about policy issues, even the most progressive folks in land use and economists are scratching their heads about the decisions the paths that we have chosen in terms of Oregon land use policy, and it has not led to all good outcomes and at a policy level. And I think we all have to recognize that land use is organic. It's hard to draw a line that's black and white because it is organic. Things change that we can't think, that we don't know all about. So anyway, just respectfully disagree with your point. And I would also point out that a zone change is extraordinarily expensive. So I'll turn it over to Kim.
Yeah. Yes.
Is that the reason why you're pursuing this path instead of a zone change, because it's less expensive?
No, not at all. In fact, I would just say that working with staff and working through the planning commission process, this seemed like the most appropriate.
Yeah. Well, I guess, in response, I would say absolutely conditions change. Absolutely a land use system, a system of codes, zoning. It is restrictive in certain ways. It's restrictive in certain ways to try to protect certain things. And that is why having the option to rezone your property creates the flexibility that I think that you're looking for, to be able to proceed with your proposed uses.
We're going to disagree, and it's fine. But I don't know that anyone is in favor of spot zoning.
So let me hit one thing that Commissioner Chang, you said, which was that
has represented numerous clients in the last few years in doing just that. So, I'm kind of baffled by that comment and who you've chosen to represent you
position on a policy level about that. And I think that's what a client and attorney, he may represent many different clients. I don't happen to agree on a policy level with some of that. That doesn't mean that there's a big difference. So anyway,
Stephen, we do have a time clock running, do we not? Okay, I just couldn't see it.
Yeah, and all the questions that I asked or comments that I made, you can deduct that from the applicant's allowable time. I mean, that was initiated by me.
I'll be fairly brief. I have a few comments that I want to make. The first is that in response to Commissioner Chang, the MUA 10 zone is actually not an agricultural or a Goal 3 protected zone. It's actually an exception zone. And so looking at changing the nature of the zone, that's not what we're doing. We're adding one use that in the, as shown in the record, is less intensive than a lot of the other uses that are already allowed in the MUA 10 zone. Hard for me to say this morning, which include other things like asphalt batch plants. And so what we're doing is we're adding something that, based upon traffic and other impacts, is actually less impactful to a zone that already allows some of these things. The county's already determined that storage is actually a rural use that has been acknowledged by LCDC. And that's why it's in other zoning districts like the R rural industrial zone. Okay, so we're not looking at changing the nature of a farm zone or a Goal 3 protected zone. We're looking at something that is already an exception zone and adding an additional use that seems to make sense, at least to us and at least to the Planning Commission that voted on it. Speaking on that, it was a 4-0 vote. There was different participants. However, there's at least a few overlap. And I would note that this proposal is significantly different than the other one. I'm not going to try to torpedo that one or make any comments other than this applicant and this text amendment was specifically responsive to requests of the cities about their own land use planning issues, to ODOT, et cetera. And so we've tried to be very responsive to those concerns and then craft a text amendment that is in fact adaptive to changing in circumstances. So if the city of Redmond changes its urban growth boundary and adds new URA lands, which it's likely to do in that same process, that'll change the properties that this is available to. Same with the city of Bend, if for some reason it grows in this direction, which was not expected. So we've tried to be responsive to those concerns as they've been raised by folks, including the cities themselves. I will say that a couple other things. I think this board is well aware that a conditional use process is not an easy process to go through, as well as on this particular type of application, it would require a site plan. So not only do we have a CUP requirement, but a site plan requirement, and those come with a lot of different guardrails, including requiring screening and fencing of buildings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In the conditional use criteria for mini storage itself, although it does allow lighting, for security purposes, it does have to be fully screened, for example. And so this is not an instance where you're going to end up with a bunch of structures blasting light onto neighboring properties. It all has to be very tightly screened. Similarly, the LM zone is overlaid on most of these properties, at least for a range. And the LM zone adds additional protection related to screening, which is quite frankly duplicated in the site plan criteria and in the conditional use criteria for mini storage facilities. And so what I would say is that any change to any land use is always difficult, and neighbors can be concerned, but in this case, they're going to go through a rigorous public process if and when any of these facilities are applied for. And the MUA 10 zoning, I can't remember what the specific criteria are for notice requirements, but it's not insubstantial. So folks are going to know about it. The other thing is there was one comment by ODOT, and both the county transportation planner and our transportation planner has responded to that, Mr. Bestman, which was, hey, this is perfectly allowed, and we understand that there will be additional right-of-way and access requirements overlaid going onto ODOT's facility, Highway 97. So with that, unless there's specific requirements, we weren't planning to submit any other materials today. We think the Planning Commission got it right. We think that this is pretty easy, particularly on this proposal and its responsiveness to concerns that have been raised so far. Any questions for me?
Yeah, can you you kind of selectively pulled up one conditionally allowable use within MUA. Could you repeat for me all of the other conditionally allowable uses within MUA?
Sure. You can do things like a public use and a semi-public use, which are basically any uses. And it's conditional use process. And the county has proceeded on not very many of those, but it's been a lot of different weird things. I have to ask staff for decisions on those, but it's a lot. Commercial activities in conjunction with a farm use, dude ranch, kennel and or veterinary clinic, a guest house, manufactured home, exploration of minerals, so a mine, private playgrounds, parks, hunting and fishing preserve, campgrounds are specifically allowed, motorcycle tracks and other recreational uses, landing strips, golf courses, all kinds of home occupations, processing facilities for forest products, i.e. a timber yard, destination resort, planned developments, cluster developments, a dump, timeshare units, hydroelectric facilities. Don't think we're going to do any of those there. Storage, crushing, and processing of minerals for asphalt plants. I mean, I can keep going on this. It's a large list of pretty intense uses.
What I would point out is that those are, they're not all associated with agriculture, but they are all associated with traditional rural industries, essentially things like mineral processing. I mean, mining is a traditional rural economic use of land. So I would say that you are proposing a change to what is, to what multiple use agriculture means. You cover a piece of land with a mini storage facility and you're not using it for agriculture. So where does the agriculture in the name MUA, multiple use agriculture, fit within that particular land use? And I would again point to, mini storage being an allowable use within rural commercial or rural industrial areas. Mr. Lafke mentioned all of the commercial development that has sprung up around the said property. And so why isn't that a completely appropriate reason to seek rezoning of that piece of land to rural commercial?
So if you would like me to respond to that, I'm happy to do so. First, I would disagree a little bit that they all are related to agricultural uses. I mean,
or rural economic uses of land.
So I don't think an asphalt batch plant is a rural economic use of land. I think it's a constructive use that is generally speaking, taking concrete and asphalt from a rural area and importing it into where most construction is, which is inside a UGB or city use. So I disagree with that. The other thing is I mean, I don't want to.
How many asphalt processing facilities are there on MUA land in Deschutes County?
There's not a requirement for need in the code. So whether or not somebody wants,
what does that mean?
There is no requirement for any applicant in Deschutes County to show a need for a particular use, and just having a lack.
Oh, I'm not asking you whether we need it. I'm asking you whether it exists.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay.
I know that there are several surface mining
Yeah,
pits, both in urban areas, inside of urban growth boundaries, and outside of them in Deschutes County. So when you start looking at some of these other uses like exploration of minerals, they exist both in rural county and not. So
it's possible that there's things that are allowable uses within MUA, conditionally allowable uses, that we actually don't have because they're completely impractical for people to do.
Potentially, yes.
Which is not what we're talking about today with adding mini storage to the MUA zoning.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Not
Okay.
at least.
All right, thank you.
Nicole, do we have any agencies? I don't believe we do. Okay, we do have Robin Hawakawa has signed up to testify.
I have some written comments to submit, so. And these are largely the same as what was provided to the Planning Commission, but during the open records middle, there was some additional material submitted by the applicant. So responding to some of those, so there are. Good morning, Chair Adair and County Commissioners. My name is Robin Hayakawa. I'm testifying today on behalf of Central Oregon Land Watch. Our address is 2843 Northwest Lolo Drive, Suite 200, Bend, Oregon 97703. Thank you for hearing public testimony today and the work you do for Deschutes County. Land Watch strongly opposes this proposed text amendment to the Deschutes County Code for several reasons. Our first concern, which Commissioner Chain, I think, was just speaking to, is a general noncompliance with the county comprehensive plan and the purpose statement of the MUA 10 zone. I brought these concerns forward during the Highway 20 hearing, and I'm raising them here again today because although preserving rural character of a zone can be a bit subjective, I believe it's important. What the applicant, in Land Watch's view, what the applicant is asking for here is akin to permitting up to 30-acre storage warehouses and parking lots on rural land. So we asked today again, is that really a type of use that supports the rural character of Deschutes County? Our second concern which I think Commissioner Chang was also speaking to an extent, is that this application conflicts strongly with Goal 5. It protects scenic resources in Deschutes County, including along Highway 97. Nicole mentioned that an EC analysis is required, which asks the board to weigh the consequences of allowing, prohibiting, or limiting the conflicting use, which in this case would be a mini storage facility. The applicant here is asking the board to make policy choices without providing a factual base upon which to weigh these conflicting values. Even when asked by the Planning Commission and staff and the board, the applicant has maintained that demonstrated need or other data are not applicable criteria. While that might be true, the burden of proof does lie with the applicant to convince the county that this is a good policy decision, and good policy decisions are supported by data and evidence. Landwatch respectfully urges the Board of County Commissioners to require the same depth of evidence that they would require if the proposed text amendment had been brought forward by staff. And then finally, much of what this comes down to has to do with Goal 14 in an effort to conditionally allow what in our view is an urban use on rural land. The applicant has tried to distinguish this application from the Friends of Yamhill County case from Luba. Landwatch maintains that this is not a meaningfully different circumstance than Friends of Yamhill County, and that the case law about mini storage facilities on rural land is clear. When an applicant tries to amend county code to allow mini storage facilities in between two UGBs without providing any evidence that the facilities will in fact serve rural residents like they're claiming, the storage facilities will not be Goal 14 compliant. That's exactly what we have here, and for these reasons, Landwatch recommends the denial of the proposed text amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Question, thank you for joining us today. Can you expand a little bit on the concept of the serving rural residents legal case there?
Yeah, so Friends of Yamhill County, in that case, there was a mini storage facility located in between McMinnville and Lafayette UGBs. And there was undisputed evidence in the record in that case that 83% of the clientele of the mini storage facility would be coming from the UGBs. So there's some obvious parallels here. We don't have any evidence in the record about who would be patronizing these mini storage facilities. They don't exist yet, but now's the time to address the Goal 14 issues because those won't be addressed during the conditional use criteria.
I just think of land use patterns and urban growth boundary and the 50-year history we have here. A house basically fully covering a lot. And, you know, I just think of the scenarios when I've been out knocking on doors, meeting people around the community. Everybody's garage is stacked full of stuff. There's a car, kayak, bicycles everywhere. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting to try to push a scenario of rural and urban because there's a huge need for this. So I was just acknowledging that, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the legal push and pull on justifying rural usage as a legal precedent.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I agree. I agree that's possible. I suspect that people in the urban areas, their garages are also overflowing and they're looking for places to park their vehicles. And
Well, that's what I'm acknowledging. urban
oh,
areas.
correct. Okay.
That's
Beautiful.
exactly what I'm saying.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robin. Is there anyone else in the room? Is there anyone with a raised hand, Stephen? There are no raised hands. Call?
All right, thank you, commissioners. So now would be the time if you had any follow-up questions for staff, or if you wanted to allow the applicant to provide any rebuttal testimony to the public comments that were provided, you could do that now.
Okay.
I guess so. I had started down a line of thought before the testimony started about how we can allow mini storage near into cities, but still essentially give cities the control over how they want to see areas in their near vicinity urbanize. And I at the time I was thinking about, these Highway 20 lands out east of Bend, versus the lands in the urban area reserve near Redmond. But now it is occurring to me that we are talking about lands on the north side of Bend as well, that also might be incorporated someday into an urban area reserve with the intention of annexation and urbanization. So I guess I'll make my question relevant to today's amendment discussion and ask whether there are conditions that we could add to this code change that would give the city of Bend some say, essentially, in whether mini storage could be allowed in these areas or not.
So that's an interesting question, Commissioner. So I wanted to note, we have joint management agreements with our cities. Thanks for coming up. But wanted to note that part of the reason why City of Redmond was so concerned about these urban reserve areas, that in our joint management agreement for these urban reserve areas, it notes that if there is any text amendment that impacts those properties, that there should be a hearing before the city council and then also before the board, because they're technically not in the UGB or city limits. They're technically, under kind of county jurisdiction, but because they are so pertinent to future urbanization of the city, that they should have a say in what's happening in those lands. So City of Redmond originally reached out and said, hey, we should have a hearing before our city council, or we would just prefer that these lands be excluded from eligibility. So the applicant noted, we can just exclude them. That solves that issue. So I wanted to note that that's typically how we handle coordination with cities. Of course, that applies to the specific urban reserve areas. So it doesn't address the issue that you've proposed with the city of Bend. I would defer to Will because he's much more of an expert on our code, but I don't think that there's any issue precluding a coordination criteria, just noting that, notice be sent to the cities specifically at the time of proposal of these applications. Again, trying not to cross our wires with the records, but there was a request from the board to reach out to the city of Bend for the other proposal for Highway 20. I'm happy to add that correspondence to this as well. But they just noted they didn't have any comments at this time. So just wanted to avoid adding a criteria that would, tie the hands of a development project if the city didn't have any feedback to share or if they didn't want to provide comments. But I looked to Will if you had any other thoughts on that.
And like as we're talking about this, let me just put out kind of what I'm envisioning here. I mean, it is very possible that the argument made by the applicant, that this is a fairly light land use that doesn't preclude future urbanization, is that the city would, either city would be very comfortable with that. Say, like, yeah, that's probably not coming into our urban growth boundary for 20 years. You could set up mini storage and have an operation there for 30 years without it having any kind of impact on our future urbanization plans, and that's compatible. But I would like to offer the cities the opportunity to say that, to assert that, that this doesn't conflict with their urbanization vision, or it does. And I guess kind of to tie on to what you were just talking about. So if there's a condition of consultation, on a application by application basis, if one of the cities came forward and said, at that moment in time when there was a specific land use application, under this new amendment, and said, this does conflict with our plans for urbanization of this area, how does that play out in that conditional use application process? Like, is that just one of many things that a hearings officer or the Board of Commissioners would consider? Is that a very significant thing for the city to assert at that time? And, you know, what kind of, I guess, what kind of influence does that have?
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners, your planning manager, Will Gross. Thanks for having me. I think you're on the right track here. You can imagine a spectrum of possible concerns here, possible approaches. One is, no coordination with the city. A maximalist approach would be a condition of the decision, a criterion that would say that, would oblige the applicant to reach out to the city and receive a comment from them. And to the extent that the city identified adverse impacts on their future urbanization potential based on the development configuration, that it would be on the applicant to revise the plan such that the city provided a favorable comment. So that would be a, kind of a maximalist. City basically gets veto power over this. Reasons to be cautious about this is that there are a variety of uses that might be developed on the property that might adversely affect for future urbanization. There's a large suite of items on the menu in the MUA 10 zone. And so this would be adding one. At the same time, it may be, we've had this discussion a number of times where we don't at the current moment have an urban reserve. What does urban reserve, I think we called it urban reserve light, looks like? What does the county do, if anything, in the interim to limit land use development potential under existing zoning to try and minimize future conflicts with urbanization? So a maximalist would be, you have to talk to the city. The city has to say that this is suitable to them. Backing away from that, you move towards, you have to consult with the city, but no comment is assumed to be no problem. So if you ask the city for a response and they don't respond in a timely manner, then it's assumed to be no problem. Backing up another step, you could oblige the city, you could limit this to, say, infrastructure corridors. So where the city has adopted, some formal map of likely future infrastructure corridors, the applicant shall observe 100-foot setback from those future infrastructure corridors associated with it. So you see those types of things in code where, that puts more obligation on the city to have a formal plan as opposed to kind of an opinion of the day about what might conflict with that future urbanization. So a spectrum of possibilities associated with involving the city in that coordination, and ranging from, again, just kind of taking the temperature of the day down to asking them to engage in some sort of planning function before precluding a use on a property, or, our code entertaining restricting that use in any way. I think if we were going to go down that path, it would be important for us as part of this record to leave the record open if there was an interest from the board in exploring this, or, certainly we have applicant rebuttal coming up, and there may be some clever ideas by the applicant to address this concern or dismiss it. But one of the things we could do in a post-hearing period is reach out to the city and see if they would, how they might deal with a condition that looks like this, requesting maximally, depending on the range of options explored, maximally, conflicting with future urbanization review. I mean, that puts some obligation on them, right? That's an unfunded mandate for the city to review a development proposal and to, maximally think creatively about how that might impact future urbanization, which, is if we received a similar ask from a jurisdiction, it's a significant ask to take a look at that. Yeah. In turn, if we back down to that, they need to adopt an infrastructure plan that shows infrastructure forecast out into kind of county lands. That's a major undertaking as well, right? That would require significant planning from, transportation, utilities, other considerations based on a variety of factors, and, something you typically see in an urban growth boundary expansion or urban reserve process. It's a pretty heavy lift. So I think we could get you some feedback from the city, should there be a post-hearing period on, what, any options you'd like us to explore us in association with the city.
Okay, thank you.
Wanted to ask Madam Chair and Commissioners, would you like the applicant to provide any rebuttal or to address that specific?
I think it would be appropriate at this time.
So one more question, this might help that too, just for the record, and how do we help me through the process of the exclusion of urban reserve parcels. So there was an application that did not state anything about that. It was just parcels outside of a city. Is it the city of Redmond specifically that brought this up?
That's correct. Yes. So when we did our GIS mapping exercise and produced the map prior to the hearing, we obviously sent notice to relevant agencies in both of the cities. And City of Redmond noted that, as I mentioned, 13 properties are in their urban reserve area. So that's when they expressed concern, because they are, I'd say they're quite a bit ahead in terms of their planning for those areas than the City of Bend. So that's when they reached out with concern, and the applicant, I think, added a reasonable criterion that satisfied the City of Redmond. We didn't receive any comments from the City of Bend. And again, I'm happy to do the same outreach that we did for the Highway 20 proposal, as Will mentioned, if there is an open record.
I would just generally lean towards, I do see this as a development opportunity on private property that could be setting the table for urbanization also, as in, I mean, if you have a parcel and you choose to do a storage facility, knowing, if you're not the first parcel, you're the second parcel at the edge of the town, and you can make a choice like this, and you're both in the urban reserve, maybe it's still a good choice. So I'm just pointing out that, it's for clarity of the application, they offered just to take it out, but that may not be a process that's the most organized for development, and balancing private property rights, I guess, where I'm going. Just wanted to have that conversation before any rebuttal.
Yeah, I mean, you did mention that the city of Redmond could have had their city council formally meet and discuss this issue, and so this just leave out the UAR. Was that the city's suggestion, or was that okay?
The applicant.
Yeah, so I just wanted to provide some context. So as I alluded to in the joint management agreement, if there is a text amendment that impacts urban reserve area properties, there's a very specific outline procedure, which essentially requires approval of the City of Redmond City Council, and for them to have their own hearing process. So they offered, they essentially checked in with staff, and then we coordinated with the applicant where they noted, hey, wanted to check in on this process with the joint management agreement. If they really want to include these urban reserve properties, we need to initiate that. Or if they weren't necessarily meaning to include those, and it was just, perhaps not understood at the time of creating those criterion that it did include those 13 properties, could you just add a criteria to exclude those? So in consultation with the applicant, it was decided that it was a preference to add that criteria, and the City of Redmond was satisfied with that as well.
Interesting that we're talking about this. And yesterday I was listening to Sisters, where I used to be, talk about what their needs were, what they're projecting. And it was, something like 250 acres added to the city within like the next 20 years, I believe. So, but, on a much smaller scale. So it's definitely, it's good to know that Redmond was paying it serious attention, and they felt it was appropriate that those properties were removed. So how do we get that same level of investigation and response from Bend?
Well, they don't have pardon me, they don't have an urban reserve the same way Redmond does. They just don't even have it.
I know, but I always look ahead that Redmond, it seems like their plan for the future makes more sense. They seem very, very organized when it comes to what they're doing. I mean, hey, they've grown a lot too. They're up to, I think, 38,000 people now. So they have a population to consider too, and what they're doing. I don't know, does Ken have something he wants to add to this?
Closing remarks, I'd like to hear those. Yeah.
For the record, again, Ken Katzroff for the applicant. I would say two things. I think that a coordination, giving a different jurisdiction a decision-making capacity is probably not something that is either defensible, I'll say, but having a notification requirement might be. So for example, if a specific proposal comes in for a CUP of one of these, have a specific notification requirement that the city wouldn't otherwise get. So require as part of the application, and it could be a code requirement added to this to provide notice to the city at the same time of application. And then obviously they can participate in the public process like any other agency can or would.
Saying for a urban reserve parcel?
Nope, for any, we specifically carved out urban reserves because we do believe that this is a rural issue, and we believe it will be served by rural residents. And that precluding the URA effectively helps to do that. But to Commissioner Chang's points, for a city that doesn't have that or may be looking to adopt a URA in the future, if a proposal comes in and the city says, actually, that's what we're thinking right now, that might then be a basis for denial of a conditional use permit, quite frankly. So a notification requirement, I think, makes a lot of sense.
We'll describe more of a consultation process as one of the options. Notification and consultation are not necessarily the same thing. So you are adding a fourth option here, essentially, in terms of conditions that could be added.
I guess that's probably right. I just think that there's not a real way to require the city to engage in this process, either with the applicant or for the county to requirement. So one way to do that is to at least notify them with a specific proposal, which they wouldn't get otherwise, unless they owned property within the notification area, and then allow planning staff at that city to determine whether or not they want to comment. I mean, we're talking about one city with regards to this proposal, the city of Bend. So it's whether or not the city of Bend wants to participate in a potential application.
No, I mean, no one can, given the capacity constraints of the city of Bend and all the fish that they're trying to fry in terms of growth management, we can't require them to consult with you, with an applicant. But setting out a process and allowing them to essentially refuse consultation, is different than just providing notification.
Nowhere near rebuttal.
Will had his hand up.
But I may have a suggestion if you're.
Will, yes.
One of the things to remember is that this is a conditional use application. And so under 18-125-015B, there's a requirement that the proposed use shall be compatible with existing and projected uses on surrounding properties based on the factors listed above. And that's the operating characteristics, the site and the design, transportation, natural and physical features of the site. So
that's conditional use in place already.
That's in place already. So as a conditional use, this would give an opportunity outside of additional requirements for the city to come in and say, hey, the projected uses on surrounding properties, include the extension of this transportation corridor. We think that this doesn't meet the conditional use standards because this is a straight line, extension of one of our major, collectors, or that where we see infrastructure needs to connect. The hearings officer, and again, this would depend on the facts specific of the case, would then have to decide to what extent that use was projected, to the extent that the city had implemented plans, there'd been mutually agreed upon documents between the city and the county about how to approach this. That would have firm evidentiary basis, I think, to the extent the city says, hey, this is a straight line projection of our road. We've thought about going this way, but nothing's been formally adopted. The hearings officer may or may not take that as a projected use of a surrounding property. So there are some safeguards in the code already. With regard to your question, and you and the applicant were discussing the, kind of the levels of engagement with the city. It can be difficult. You can see the spectrum from, you must get a comment to, you could get a comment, but no comment is an acceptable comment. That's another thing. But in certain times, jurisdictions are just, and, other government agencies are just blown out, and, the fact that even getting them to respond, or they might say, hey, you've asked a really interesting question. We're going to have to go through a multi-month process where we talk to our council before we respond to you in this. So getting a response that happens within a quasi-judicial land use time process may be difficult. We certainly could, you see some application types where pre-applications are mandated. Free pre-applications are offered to any applicant of any file type for the planning division. For certain types of cell towers and other applications, pre-applications are mandated. And so you could imagine something where a pre-application meeting's mandated, and that, you could direct as part of that. And, the adjacent city, shall be invited to said pre-application. We can't make them attend, but we could ask them to come to a meeting as well. That would give them, both a notice and a kind of a proactive outreach to attend a meeting to discuss the application. Again, just brainstorming, the applicant may have concerns or reasonable modifications of that type of approach.
Well, so for clarity, a notification requirement, because since this is a legislative text amendment and it does limit 2,500 feet from UGB, is the applicant supportive of that notification requirement? Simple notification to jurisdiction that you're at the edge of.
At the point of a conditional use.
Yeah, whenever is appropriate. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Well, just giving some clarity on my thoughts here, I could see getting to closing the hearing and setting a date for deliberations, just kind of as a starting point for letting you know where I'm at.
Okay.
So, yeah, so not leaving a record open. Was there any request for a record open? I haven't heard anything,
No, we just did have a letter submitted today that,
which is in the.
that we
record
should
now.
review before we
Yeah.
do our deliberations.
I would be interested in leaving the record open to allow the city of Bend to provide comment on this specific question that we've been kicking around about essentially what level of notification, consultation, or conceivably even, veto power they would be interested in having for future applications under this amendment.
Could we leave it open just for the city of Bend? Or does it have to be open for everything?
So I wouldn't support that. I mean, I
What?
think that's, yeah, this is land outside. There's no urban reserve. It's been vetted pretty well. So I'm just pointing out that I wouldn't lean towards that.
Stephanie. what do
Stephanie
you have to
Marshall
say?
again, Senior Assistant Legal Counsel. Leaving the record open, to the extent that somebody hears that the record's open and they're not the city of Bend, it's really up to staff as to whether they're going to filter that in that manner for other public comments. I think that the easiest approach would be to just leave it open, period, and then proceed.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may, we can follow the similar process that we followed for Highway 20, where today staff will directly reach out to City of Bend, notifying them that the board has requested their response to this specific item and asking for a timely response before the open record period closes. So
Okay.
we're happy to do that.
And accepting no response as a response.
Right. So we'll write a letter then that they did not respond and date it. I mean, yeah, like, okay, we didn't hear from you, so it must be okay. So how long of a period did we allow for the other hearing then?
For the Highway 20 hearing, we left the record open for 2 weeks. We got a
Like-
response within 1 week. So it's up to the board. So you could either leave the written record open until October 2nd, which is 1 week, or October 9th, which is 2 weeks.
To be safe, maybe October 9th then? To be consistent?
Yes, and at 4 p.m. is typically when we close
Okay.
the record on that day.
Okay. So is everybody amenable to October 9th, leaving the record open until 4 p.m.?
If that's the will of the majority, that's fine.
Sure.
Excellent. So it sounds like all 3 commissioners are in favor of leaving the written record open, closing the oral hearing and leaving the written record open until Wednesday, October 9th at 4 p.m. Just a couple reminders about our open record period. Please do send in if other parties beyond City of Bend are planning to provide comment, please do ensure that those are sent prior to 4 p.m. because we need to receive it by 4 p.m. There might be a slight delay with our server. 5 megabytes is the maximum our server can handle. So if there's large exhibits, you might need to send those in separate emails. And we don't accept links. We can't retrieve that content. So please do include PDFs of web pages if you are including links. And you can send those to me, Nicole.Mardell@deschutes.org. And with that, thank you very much, Madam Chair and commissioners. And we will schedule deliberations following that open record period and return.
Okay, great. So sometime after the 9th then?
Yes.
A week
I
or
think
two
we're-
after.
I think we'll coordinate with the applicant, but I think we're shooting for late October, but we'll
Okay.
verify that date with the applicant and reach out.
So one other idea as this is evolving, as I say, we discussed notification to a jurisdiction. So I don't know if it's appropriate, but maybe send that information to the city of Redmond also. As I don't want to drive the applicant's job,
Happy to.
yeah. If that's appropriate, that's where I was.
When you send them this info, can you make sure you also share these very specific maps so that they can kind of get a grasp of the significance of what we're discussing.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Will. Stephanie?
Thank you, everyone.
All right, so we're now at item number 12, the housekeeping amendments. Thank you.
Closer to being on time now.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Kyle Collins, Associate Planner. Give me a second here. I'll share my screen. All right. As the chair pointed out, this is a public hearing for our periodic housekeeping amendments. So now I can turn it over to Chair Deere to open the hearing.
Thank you, Kyle. This is the time and place set for hearing on file number 247-24-000417 TA concerning amendments to the Deschutes County Code to correct minor errors identified by staff, other county departments, and the public. The proposed amendments also incorporate updates from rulemaking at the state level through amendments to Oregon revised statutes and the Oregon administrative rules. Staff will outline the hearing procedures that will be followed.
Thank you, Chair. The project website and all the record materials can be found at the following link shown on the slide here. Today, the Board of County Commissioners will take testimony and receive written evidence concerning the proposed text amendment. The hearing is also being recorded. The hearing will be conducted in the following order. Staff, as the applicant, will provide a brief presentation. Agencies, if any are present, will provide any testimony, and then interested persons can provide testimony. And then following all testimony, the commission can request staff to answer any additional questions they may have. Please note that this is a hybrid public hearing with both in-person and remote participation. Before starting any testimony, please provide your first and last name as well as your mailing address so we can add you to the notification list. For all of our in-person participants, if you wish to testify, please fill out a blue sign-up sheet and submit it to the board's executive assistant, Brenda, to the left of the dais. Chair Dare will call up in-person participants for their testimony, and after your name is called, please come up to one of the tables at the front of the room before beginning your testimony. For all of our remote participants, if you wish to testify, you must be logged into Zoom or have called in using the Zoom dial-in option. When the chair asks if anyone would like to testify, you will need to use the raise hand feature to notify the board. To do this, you need to press the raise hand button on your computer or smart device, or if you've dialed in, please dial *9. In addition to any oral testimony, if anyone has written testimony to submit, please hand it to me directly. And if you're participating remotely, you can submit your written testimony to me via email at kyle.collins@deschutes.org. Oops. Please note that the chair and staff are responsible for conducting an orderly hearing. Any testimony or behavior which is inappropriate will be addressed and may result in that member of the public being removed from the hearing. Questions to and from the chair may be entertained at any time at the chair's discretion. Cross-examination of people testifying will not be allowed. However, if any person wishes to ask a question of another person during that person's testimony, please direct your question to the chair after being recognized. The chair is free to decide whether or not to ask such questions of the person testifying. Prior to commencement of the hearing, any party may challenge the qualifications of any commissioner for conflict of interest. This challenge must be documented with specific reasons supported by facts.
Should any commissioner be challenged, the member may disqualify himself or herself, withdraw from the hearing, or make a statement on the record of their capacity to hear and decide the issue.
Does any commissioner have anything to disclose? And if so, please state the nature of same and whether you can proceed.
I have nothing to disclose and I can proceed.
I have nothing to disclose and I can proceed.
And I have nothing to disclose and I can proceed. Does any party wish to challenge any commissioner, member of the hearings body based on conflicts of interest? Anyone raised hands? Stephen, anyone online? Seeing none, the hearing is now open. Staff will proceed with a brief staff report.
All right, as I stated at the beginning, this is our periodic housekeeping amendments. All members of the board have gone through this process before. We had a work session on this exact slate of amendments last week, but to cover everything for the hearing purpose, these housekeeping amendments are generally intended to correct errors. These are reference errors or Scrivener's errors across our code, reinstate any omissions that might have been accidentally deleted, and finally to reflect any updates to state law that we're required to put in place in our local code. Impact-wise, there will be some minor changes to some of our permitted uses and use standards. All of these are in alignment with state statutes. So again, these are things that we're required to put in place. However, there are no specific state statutes, administrative rules, or land use goals that apply to these changes. Here's a full list of the proposed amendments. I'm not going to go through all these in great detail, but just so you have a clear understanding of all the chapters of our code that are being affected. To go through some of the specific categories of amendments that we're going through, as I stated, some of these are Scrivener's errors or reference errors. Here's all the various chapters that are included. Omissions that were previously deleted from code, references that are misaligned via other text amendments that have occurred, and things of that nature. The second category of amendments that we're looking to are related to changes in state law that we're required to bring into our local code. The first of these has to do with House Bill 2192 and the associated Oregon revised statutes. These have to do with the standards associated with lawfully established dwelling replacements in our resource zones. So the exclusive farm use zone and forest use zones. Those are the two big areas that we're discussing. State law now requires that there are specific standards that weren't previously in place when replacing a dwelling in these zones. Our old code didn't capture many of these, and so now it's being updated to reflect that. One, specific criteria that determine if a dwelling is eligible to be replaced at all. Specific siting criteria for replacement dwellings within these resource zones. The timelines for constructing any replacement dwellings or deconstructing and converting original dwellings that would be left on site. Deed restrictions for replacement dwellings that are being put in place. And then finally, some specific construction provisions associated with Section R327 of the State Building Code. Board is aware these have to do with fire hardening requirements, and those standards will actually be mandatory for all replacement dwellings and resource zones moving forward. Here are the specific code chapters that are being affected by these changes. The next updates that have to do with state law regard the definitions and use requirements for residential facilities and residential homes. Residential facilities and homes are treatment facilities for adults. The difference between a home and a facility in this case has primarily to do with the number of persons that can occupy one of these facilities. So once an applicant has gone through a licensing process with the state of Oregon, they are allowed to host one of these facilities either in a single family or multifamily dwelling to provide treatment services, adult foster care, things of that nature. The primary thing that's being updated in regards to where these uses are allowed, state law now clarifies that residential treatment homes are allowed in all zones where single family dwellings are allowed as an outright use, and residential facilities are allowed in all zones where multifamily dwellings are allowed as an outright use. And that's been reflected in all the changes to our local code. So again, we're just clarifying for all of the various chapters that we have throughout our code where single family dwelling has been previously called out as an allowed use. We've now explicitly added in residential homes. The same is true of all zones that allow multifamily dwellings as an allowed use. Here are all the various chapters that are being affected by these, starting with our definitions have been updated, and then the remaining chapters are associated with those uses that I previously mentioned. It's quite a lot of these. The next slate of state law changes have to do with modifications to which dwellings qualify for 4-year approval windows at the local level. The board is probably aware that when we issue local land use decisions, generally those are afforded a 2-year approval window during which the applicant has to actually initiate the use. So if you go through a conditional use process, you generally have 2 years, for example, to start that use, construction on site, whatever the site development program is. However, state law affords 4-year approval windows. So for specific uses, these are generally things in resource zones. You can think of things like non-farm dwellings are probably some of the most common ones that we see here. That state law has now been updated to include other dwelling types within these resource zones, and our local code has been updated to reflect that. The two that are now being brought into that 4-year approval window are replacement dwellings in the EFU zone and hardship dwellings in the EFU zone. Below, you can see the chapter that's been modified associated with these proposed amendments. Next, I'll move on to comments from agencies and the public. We only received one agency comment associated with our notification process. That was from our senior transportation planner. He found specifically that in compliance with statewide planning goal 12, we have to evaluate whether there are any transportation planning rule effects from the proposed amendments. However, he found that all the proposed amendments comply with TPR, given that there's likely to be unchanged or at least reduced traffic. Public comments. We've only received one public comment to date. That was from Ken Katzeroff of Shelby, Williamson, and Wyatt, who you just spoke with in the previous item. He expressed some reservations around the inclusion of proposed agricultural land definition in Title 19. This was originally brought forward by staff because currently our Title 19 section of code, which deals with land surrounding the city of Bend, it's kind of a weird section of code. It doesn't actually include definitions that come from state law associated with things like agricultural uses, agricultural land, etc. That's led to some confusion over time when certain uses have been proposed in these Title 19 areas. And to maintain consistency from Title 18 to Title 19, we thought we would just import those definitions over. However, Mr. Katzeroff pointed out that this might constitute something more of a policy decision level rather than a true housekeeping amendment in order to keep things neat and clean. Staff actually removed those definitions from our Title 19 definitions code section. So those are no longer included as a part of this package. You can reference Exhibit Q as a part of the attached exhibits if you'd like to see that. Planning Commission review. They held a public hearing on August 22nd, 2024, voted 5-0 to recommend approval. No specific discussion of the amendments, as these are housekeeping amendments. They're relatively perfunctory. We go through these generally on an annual basis, and none of these were particularly controversial, especially after removal of those Title 19 definitions that I referenced earlier. With that, I'll move on to next steps. Board should be familiar with these, but you have the option to continue the hearing to a date and time certain. You have the option to close the hearing and leave the written record open to a date certain. You have the option of closing the hearing and setting a date for deliberations, or finally, you could close the hearing and commence deliberations today if you wish. And with that, I can take any questions that you might have.
No questions.
No questions.
Kyle, I do have a question. When you made the decision to accept what Ken Katzeroff's letter had stated, was that a decision between you and Will Groves and Peter? Or
It was indeed, yeah. So it's possible that that particular slate of amendments might come forward outside of a housekeeping process, just because, as I pointed out, there have been issues associated with Title 19 areas that some of these definitions would help clarify. But given that they don't previously exist and there is some confusion around how these state derived definitions might be applied to the Title 19 areas, we'd likely do that through a more formal text amendment process that would constitute policy decisions.
Title 19 is Bend Urban Reserve.
UAR 10 and SR 2.5 zone, as well as the West Side Transect zone. It's those three zones. But again, yes, they're all surrounding the city of Bend.
I'm just thinking, so that might come around if Bend starts working towards urban reserve. Yeah, I got it. You guys are more precise with the terminology, but if Bend starts a project, that's when it may pop up for us.
It is possible to arise at that point, yes.
All right. So do we have anyone in the to testify at this moment? Is there anyone, no one in the room to testify on our housekeeping and text amendments? Stephen, is there anyone online? Okay. All right. So then let's close the public hearing. And do we have any further discussion on this?
I would support working towards deliberations today.
Okay.
I would support that as well.
Okay, so all three of us would support deliberations at this moment then.
So do we need a formal motion to close both the oral and written records, or
Just go ahead and do a formal motion.
Okay,
I'll move to close both the oral and written records on these 2024 housekeeping amendments associated with ordinance number 2024-008.
And I'll second it.
okay. Any further discussion? Okay, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
So yeah, a lot of definitions by the state being propagated through our code. It is just a package of housekeeping amendments. And as I say, we just discussed the concept of Title 19 and the fact that that may come back. And let's not debate if it's a policy. Let's just leave it out for now. So I support this package.
Go to first reading.
Should we have don't we need a motion
No,
on the
the-
ordinance?
As I said, I was just showing support for it.
Okay,
So I'll move approval of first reading of ordinance number 2024-008 by title only.
Second.
further discussion? No further discussion, calling for the vote. Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Did I mess up with the last public hearing because we didn't officially vote and close it? Is it okay? All of a sudden I went, okay. Thank you, Kim. I know you,
She's keeping an eye on us.
I know. Thank you, thank you. All right. Thank you.
Make sure we read the title.
Oh.
By title only. Oh, yes, got to find it. I'm sure it's here somewhere.
130.
Okay, approve. We just voted 3-0 approving ordinance number 2024-008 and by title only, and ordinance amending Deschutes County Code Title 15 Buildings and Construction, Title 18 Zoning Ordinances, Title 19 Bend Urban Area Zoning Ordinance, and Title 22 Procedures Ordinances to incorporate changes to state and federal law and provide clarification of existing regulation, procedures, and policies. And we still included Title 19 in this.
So there are some edits to Title 19 that are not associated with the agriculture.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you very much, commissioners. I will see you in 2 weeks for second reading.
Okay. Excellent, thank you, Kyle. Okay, so we're now at number 13. Hallie?
Morning, Commissioners. For the record, Hallie King with Community Development. I do have a printed out large scale plans of the existing conditions for the next item. So I'll bring those up. This was also included in your packet.
It was nice to hear you on the radio this morning. Yes. Yeah, they were, you're from Monday's meeting. You were on the
There
radio.
you go. They get.
Yes, I was
that's
like,
what the mics are for.
I know you're one of the famous people of today.
Surprise.
Very cool. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and join the Zoom webinar so I can get my screen.
Yes, the interesting thing is we're talking about something from what, 50 years ago? Yes.
So again, Madam Chair, we'll all have you start there with the opening script.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is the time and place set for a hearing regarding file numbers 247-24-000244-1A. This is a hearing on a request for a development agreement for Thousand Trails RV Campground. Staff will outline the hearing's procedures that will be followed.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Hallie King, Associate Planner with Community Development. And I know we've gone through a few hearings this morning already, but I'm going to run through again our hearing procedures for those who are attending today's hearing. So first, staff will explain the hearing format and how to testify, followed by a brief presentation on the application. We'll then move into the testimony portion, where the applicant will have 30 minutes. Any agencies in attendance will have 10 minutes. And then those in support of the application will have 3 minutes. Those in opposition will also have 3 minutes, followed by an opportunity for applicant rebuttal for 10 minutes. And then any closing comments from staff. So again, this is a hybrid public hearing today with both in-person and remote participation. For those that are participating either in person or remotely, just a reminder to please state your first and last name and mailing address prior to beginning your testimony. For those joining us in person today, please fill out a blue sign-up sheet by the door and submit it to our board's executive assistant, Brenda, here to the left of the dais. Chair Adair will then announce each person and invite them up to the tables at the front to provide their testimony. And I noticed this is an older version, but you can ignore the portion about the remand. That was from 2 weeks ago. So anyways, everyone is able to testify today who would like to. For those joining us remotely, you must be logged in using Zoom. Again, you'll use the raise hand feature to communicate you would like to testify. Or if you're dialing in on the phone, it'll be *9. For anyone who would like to submit written testimony, that can be handed in today to staff or emailed to my email address here on the screen, hallie.king@deschutes.org. And again, we ask everyone to please be respectful. We want to ensure an orderly hearing today. Again, Madam Chair, I'll now return to the script and note that the commissioners must disclose any ex parte contacts, prior hearing observations, biases, or conflicts of interest.
Does any commissioner have anything to disclose? And if so, please state the nature of same and whether you can proceed.
I have nothing to disclose and I can proceed.
As a resident of Southern Deschutes County and Lapine Chambers, Sun River, we've had events at that lodge building there. I've driven by many times. I've been into the store there, but I've never thought about the land use. So I'm just pointing out that there's some connections to it, but I have nothing to disclose and I can proceed.
And I have nothing to disclose and I can proceed. Does any party wish to challenge any commissioner, member of the hearings body based on ex parte contacts, biases, or conflicts? I see none in the room. Stephen, is anyone with a raised hand online? Okay. As no challenges are presented prior to opening the hearing, does anyone have any procedural objections to the public hearing? Any procedural objections? Stephen, anyone raised? Seeing none, The hearing is now open. Staff will proceed with a brief staff report.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, today we are here for a public hearing on a proposed development agreement for the Thousand Trails RV Campground. The subject property is outlined here in red, totals about 280 acres, located along Century Drive along the southern boundary, as well as the eastern boundary with Huntington Drive starting in the south. This area is generally known as the Three Rivers area. The Oregon Water Wonderland subdivision is located to the west, and Vandevert Acres to the north and the east as well. You can see the properties bisected by the meandering Little Deschutes River. The Deschutes River is located further west. The property owner is MHC TT Incorporated, and they're represented by Schwabe, Williamson, and Wyatt. So the reason we're here today is to essentially the applicants wanting to memorialize development rights that were approved in a 1979 master plan for the Thousand Trails campground. Certainly the applicant will likely go into more detail in their presentation, but essentially on or before 1973 is as far back as the county has some record of approving a master plan for a planned development on this site. Again, the records, unfortunately, for unknown reasons, haven't been well maintained in those years. So then in 1979, there was, confusion regarding the scope of development. So the developer at that time came back in to memorialize this master plan that you see here, which we have that record. And then again, this intention of this was to reflect the 1973 approval. Then subsequently in 1986, there was a series of different site plan review applications, one to install a water system to serve the campground. And then perhaps most importantly, a 1986 site plan review where it was a hearings officer approval to allow up to 520 campsites in addition to a mini golf facility. And so that decision again conditioned a maximum of 520 sites on the subject property. Again, there have been a few other land use approvals here and there since this time, but really not much in our records. So again, fast forwarding to today, the property owner is looking to enter into a development agreement with the county, which is authorized. State statute outlines a procedure and process for this, which can specify obligations, standards, and conditions. And so the key components, again, of this specific development agreement is to provide, to allow Thousand Trails up to 520 sites. Again, there's approximately 335 existing, so that means potential for additional 185 sites. They've requested a waiver of road driveway paving standards, which is allowed in our code. And then perhaps most importantly as well is that, future land use application review would be required if and when they wanted to actually build out the expansion. Neighbors would be noticed, there would be a quasi judicial land use process. Some record additions since the memo and the staff report was mailed or was issued. I have received a total of 6 written public comments from neighbors, primarily citing concerns to impacts to wildlife, traffic, water and septic suitability, wildfire risk, and then concerns with overall property maintenance. Again, a lot of these concerns are tied to, actual physical development of the site. Certainly considerations if and when an application would come forward. But those are questions and comments we've received thus far. And again, just to remind everyone, the application record is on our webpage. To the extent I receive any other written materials today during the hearing, I'll get those uploaded as soon as possible.
So the 6 that you did receive, were they all against or were for?
They were all, I think, primarily citing concerns with future development on the site. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. And again, those are all in the record as well. And so again, we'll come back to this as well once we get through testimony, but options for the commissioner and the board to move forward today would be 1, continuing the hearing to a date and time certain. 2, closing the oral portion of the hearing and leaving the written record open to a date and time certain. 3, closing the hearing and scheduling deliberations for a future date. Or 4, closing the hearing and commencing deliberations. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions for the commissioners before we move into the testimony portion.
Are there any questions?
I mean, just out of curiosity, it doesn't have much effect on my thoughts on this item, but the memo, the staff memo said that future development would likely go in the western portion of the property. I mean, can you kind of in a non-specific way, can you just kind of tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, and I think certainly the applicant, that'd be good for them to touch on as well. But in just looking at the existing conditions compared to the 1979 master plan, there are some sites, again, between the rear of those properties fronting on Snow Goose Road, between the current sites, there's that open area that appears that it wasn't fully built out. So that would be, again, would love the applicant to confirm, but I think that's the area that is referred to in that. Yeah.
Okay, Snow Goose, which is on the far left side.
Correct. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. So are we ready for the applicant then? All right. So Ken.
Good morning, commissioners. Long time no see. For the record, Ken Katroff. I'm an attorney at Schwabe, 360 Southwest Bond Street, Suite 500. You can come up. Bend, Oregon 97702. I represent the applicant in this case. And what we're trying to do here, I think Hallie did a fantastic job. What we're trying to kind of do here is just set the stage and make sure everybody's on the same playing field with what the existing conditions are, what was originally approved, so that we aren't, I don't want to say fighting, but so that we're not litigating in a quasi-judicial application as to what has already been approved, because there has been some record keeping fumbles, I would guess, from both the applicant, quite frankly, the property has changed hands a number of times, and from the county's perspective. So we don't have full application documents from pre-1973, and I don't think we even have a full set of documents from 1986. But what we do have are what was approved in 1986, which appears to be 520 sites. Right now, as Hallie said, there's about 335, 350-ish. That are built out currently and in use, and we just want to execute on the rest of that plan. Before Luis talks, what that would require briefly is, consistent with this development agreement, is a new site plan review. So that deals with all kinds of different physical improvements to the site, and additional requirements around fire conditions, fencing, et cetera. That's the time and place where other restrictions related to, for example, migration corridors and whatnot, that's when those would apply, if at all. There is a WA overlay, and so that will be handled during the development process. But right now, the goal is to just come to an agreement with the county of what was originally approved, and what we can prove was originally approved. And then there was one special request, which Hallie did note, which is a waiver of particular standards. And the only standards that we're seeking a waiver on are the paving standards. Currently, the site is not paved. It is gravelled and maintained for that, in that purpose. And we want to have any additional site plan also allow gravel as opposed to pavement. And there's a couple of different reasons, but we think it's the best opportunity to move forward without impacting water table, et cetera. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Luis to talk a little bit about the site in general and their plans, and then I'll certainly circle back if there's any additional questions. I'll hit one more thing, which is in 2015, the county and the campground, in consultation with DEQ, resized and re-upped their septic. And so that's been handled, and it will handle the amount of complete build out of sites of 520. So that process has been completed, and that was done in, I think, 2015. I don't know if the DEQ process was done then, but certainly the county signed a Lux at that point in time, and they've seen approval for what's actually necessary to serve the site. So I just wanted to let the county know that. All right.
Yeah, Luis Gonzalez, Equity Lifestyle Properties. I represent the TT Thousand Trails portfolio. Live in Arizona, and I'm here today to answer any questions or any information you'd like about our campground at Stone River Bend. Currently, it's an RV campground. We do have some annuals out there. There is a certain section of it. It's called Fort Laramie, 99-year leases. That was put into effect before we bought the property. We're the third owners of that property, and we'd like to expand with the expansion on the west side of that property in the next few years.
Not an expansion, a build out of what's currently approved.
Nice terms today. Yep.
Okay.
And that is.
I mean, we're
side by
expanding compared to what's already there.
Yeah.
That's the side by Snow Goose Road.
That is correct.
Okay, that's where you have some land that has not been utilized.
That is correct. That just that west side.
So would that be, so there's some small roads that don't have sites off of them right now. Would that be essentially creating sites along those existing roads?
Yeah, the existing roads have already been created along that west side.
And again, future development then would require a specific site plan to identify where all of those would be and any additional infrastructure, whether it's additional restroom facilities, shower facilities, campsites, et cetera. So that will all be done through a site plan process. That's not the intent of this process today. It's just to say, this is what we've got, and this is how we're going to move forward.
As you saw, or maybe you saw during a work session, I was asking, what are we doing here? So it's a development agreement, 7-year window though. So that, and it was mentioned, it's kind of like a Lux, or not Lux, but lot of record thing. Could you help me understand the concept of why a 7-year window? This is state statute that gives us this opportunity, and what does that mean?
Yeah, it's just a state statute, and the reason is that we've asked for a waiver of standards, quite frankly, which is the paving. We don't want to have to pave, and so the opportunity with the development agreement is so we can kind of vest to what's the existing code. But if for some reason we don't move forward on a site plan in that time period, we would need to come back.
So is there an extension process to an?
I will say it's not obviously
just expire.
Yeah, it would expire. So we would have to come back for a new development agreement. Quite frankly, I don't expect that we're going to be sitting on our hands for 7 years. It's just that's what the statute provides.
Yeah. So this is a state process we're following at this time. Thank you.
I just want to dig in and following what you said before, that responding to Commissioner DeBone's comment, I want to dig into the word approved has been used today, and I just want to hear very clearly from the applicant that that there's an understanding that future development would need to go through all of the land use review processes required for new development applications, and that even though we're talking about a development agreement that was approved many decades ago, sort of like that means we are agreeing on what the original vision was, but any additional development that happens from this point forward does need to comply with all the current regulations, traffic, water, septic capacity, et cetera. Is that,
yeah. So
is that's the way that I understand it at this point. Is that accurate?
I think what you're saying is accurate. I just want to clarify what we say is approved is a master plan permitting up to 520 sites. So what is required in order to expand, we'll use that word loosely, the current amount of campsites from let's just call it 330, 350, up to 520 will require a site plan. What it doesn't require is a new conditional use application, for example, for a campground. It requires us to be consistent with the master plan, which is a exhibit on this as part of the development agreement to say this is what the master plan is, and then to effectuate the rest of that master plan, we need to come in for site plan review. So all of the site plan review criteria, 18-124, would apply. 18-124, right? Okay. All of that would apply. And it's substantial. But that's what the next step in land use review is, which is a quasi-judicial process that would have notice and comment periods, potentially hearings officer, potentially appeal to the board or LUBA.
And can you confirm that the at least some of those concerns addressed in, raised in the public comments, those are things that are addressed during that site plan review process?
Yep.
Wildlife, traffic, water quality protection.
Yeah. Maybe it'd be more appropriate for Hallie to speak on that. I'm happy to respond, but
that'd be great.
Again, Hallie King, Associate Planner. Exactly. So traffic analysis would be required as part of an expansion, making sure septic is provided. Fire, we would provide notice to the fire agency, wildlife, ODF and W. So yeah, that is all included as the site plan criteria review.
Thank you. So for example, just one criteria I'll hit, 18-124-060K is a transportation access to the site shall be adequate for the use. And then there's specific things like mitigation for transportation related impact shall be required. So all of those issues will be hit during the site plan review time period.
My one other question was just about the current roads. So can you describe, give us some detail about, the current road surfacing, not paved, but, what the existing surface is and what kind of the maintenance, not just maintenance, but, the heavy maintenance, when surface replacement and repair, what the schedule and criteria are for that.
Okay, right now the roads are all gravel throughout the community, and repair and maintenance is always ongoing. It's through the year when everything's need to be done. We do have some excess gravel in our maintenance yard, and we do have a tractor. So whenever we need to repair or actually maintain, not repair, because roads are in pretty good order, our maintenance crew actually does the repair and fix up whenever needed.
So you're doing it on a day-by-day basis?
Day-to-day basis, yeah.
Not like we're scheduled to do that every 3 years or anything?
No, there's no schedule. We basically maintain them as needed.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You will have time at the end. Okay, do we have any people in support of the project? I don't believe I have. Is there anyone online with a raised hand, Stephen, in support? None, no raised hands. Okay, so we do have 2 people in the room that wanted to testify in opposition. The first person we'll call up, and you do have 3 minutes, is John Dandana.
The next speaker too.
Sure. And Sarah?
Sarah's going to start off with.
Oh, sure. Okay, Sarah, you're first.
Sarah right there. Is it all right if I approach you guys?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you so much, John.
I have a copy for Haley. Haley, right?
Hallie.
Hi.
Hal.
Hallie, I have a copy for Hallie too as well. I apologize. We did not get all this. We didn't know about this until a couple of days ago. So it's taken us a while to get this stuff together. We have more stuff. 1% too as well. But we just want to give.
So that you can do testimony on the microphone. You're speaking
Yeah.
to us, but this is is
this a 1 copy or is this 3?
Just 1 copy, and I apologize.
Okay, then why don't we give it to Brenda and then she will copy it for us.
Be able to look at it.
Yeah.
So we can hand some stuff
And sticking to the microphone is just about capturing it for the record.
Yes, we have to
and other
capture.
people following.
Yes. Okay, Sarah.
Sarah Lundgren, 56065 Schoolhouse Road, Bend 97707. Good morning. I'm an HOA board member at Vanderbilt Ranch. I've been a resident of the Thousand Trails area since 1970. Vanderbilt Ranch is very concerned about 3 provisions contained in the agreement before you today. The first would be memorializing the additional 185 camping sites. The second would be vesting and permitting all existing facilities on site. And 3, vesting the property while overlooking and disregarding any possible code violations. We believe it would be in your constituents' best interest and the county's to conduct a site visit before giving carte blanche to the developer. Thousand Trails has not demonstrated an ability to be a proper steward of the existing site. Adding 185 sites could only magnify this issue. There is a literal dump in the possible wetlands area containing hazardous materials, furniture, RVs, paint cans, propane tanks, and household furnishings. The existing sewer treatment plant is defective and cannot handle processing the sewage for the existing site. The smell of septic has permeated the air since construction. And
You refer to construction, like, are you saying?
since the septic treatment plant was constructed,
Okay, do you know when that was?
it was approximately 8 years ago.
Okay.
Upgraded or
I think it was new at the
Okay.
time. And the 185 additional sites will increase traffic on an already dangerous road. Regarding vesting and permitting all existing facilities, this would include the sewer treatment plant that Thousand Trails told us at the time of construction was being built without county permits. Our questions are, who's the certified operator on site to inspect, operate, and repair this facility? With such broad approval of the facilities by this body, I assume you accept liability on behalf of the county for sewage spills and any possible seepage into the surrounding wetlands and the Little Deschutes River. Regarding overlooking the code violations, we are very concerned about the risk of fire on the property. There are 12 huge slash piles along our joint property line and many more throughout the property. We've had numerous conversations over the past 2 to 3 years with Thousand Trails to request remediation. Nothing has been done. Furthermore, the 1986 documentation referenced the need for forest thinning and a fire prevention plan. A search of county records finds nothing. We recognize that shoddy record keeping has necessitated this interest in an agreement. However, such an agreement is not in the best interest of the constituents in the Thousand Trails area. John Dandona, who's president of our HOA, will expand upon some specific concerns. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, my name is John Dandona. I live at 55995 Hash Knife Road, Bend, Oregon. The packet I bought up there, it would be imperative that you look at that while I speak, because I'm going to speak to the pictures that have recently been taken there on site. So in order for me to explain that, would it be possible to pass that up to the chairman? She has it.
Yeah, he's.
Do you have it, Phil?
Chang's looking at.
I mean, Mr. Chang, you have it?
I'm trying to, as fast as I can, to go through it.
Okay, we'll start with number 1. Let's just start with page number 1. That's just a picture that was taken last night of the about 200 elk that were in our backyard. We are very concerned about the environment, the forest. We're unbelievably good stewards of the land there. We've tried to deal with our neighbor on numerous occasions to anything we can do to help to improve what they do down there, because the trespassers, I can go on and on and on, but I want to get to the details. So these are the elk that are there in our yard. Page number 2 is an side of the land right there. And if you could look at along the line there, it looks like there's it's a junk pile. Okay, it's just a dump. Okay, we have propane tanks, and I have pictures of those in there too as well. I have a picture of the septic system that they put right next to our property, where we have had to live with the smell of sewage all the time. When I first started building that, I came down to the planning department down here, and I asked them, I said, you know, they're moving dirt, they're putting in a building down here. What's going on? They said, they're not doing anything down there. I said, they sure are. They said, no, they're not doing anything. We're going to go down and check, make sure they're not doing anything. 2 hours later, I get a phone call back. They said DEQ has approved them to build this septic tank, and they have nothing more to do with it. So we have to live with it. Well, we've consulted just recently some people who do septics, and half of our ranch lives on septic systems, and we do not have the smell of sewage coming around our area all the time. Yesterday, an 87-degree day, foul smelling air. It's right next to the riding rink where kids play. They can't go down there and use that facility at all. So as you go through it, you see pictures of the facility. One is a facility looking through the riding rink. The next you see is a picture of barrels that are sitting there. If you look at those barrels, you take a close look at those barrels, they're filled with methanol. Okay. Highly, highly combustible. I'm a doctor. Okay. I majored in chemistry when I was in school. You don't leave methanol laying around, especially in a forest. And the first picture I showed you of the elk laying there, we also are seeing the little lava fire the smoke is flowing from behind. If you come on that site and you guys were to walk through that site, you would be amazed. I'm being polite with using that word. That forest, you can't even walk through it. If a fire starts there and they have these 50-gallon drums of methanol there, unbelievable. I've included on there the safety data hazard sheet for the methanol, which you can look through. It'll tell you everything you need to know about methanol being stored on open site like that. The next pictures are of hydrated lime packages that are sitting there with half covered. They're not supposed to be being mixed with water. Again, another hazardous waste in there. And I've included a material data sheet for that too as well, for hydrated lime. So these are little concerns. If you're thinking about giving them another, they can't even take care of what they have now. So if you were to say, they were able to put another 185 sites in there, I just can't even imagine it. The last two pages, I think I'll give you the number on it right now. I apologize for getting out of hand. It's just, you see all the junk in there, by the way. I'm not going to go through every picture of the junk, but that is, it is everywhere there. You drive down that road, you drive by on South Century, you see a nice little place there. It looks like a nice little campground there. Go inland in there and see what they do. They have absolutely no respect for this property at all. Zero. When you look around there, you look at the piles that are right up against our property line. There's 12 piles of wood debris. I've had ODF. We built some stuff there on the ranch, and we always consult with the Fish and Game, ODF, fire department, local fire department, anything we do there. ODF came on the property. They looked and they saw these burn piles that they had there. They couldn't believe that they were still there. We've gone over there and talked to the staff that's over there, and nothing's been done about it except more junk and more wood being added to those right next to our property line. So we're very, 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 very concerned about fire. There was a sheet that I added at the very last page, page 21. There are some questions that has to be asked and answered by DEQ, because obviously I talked with Hallie yesterday. They have no idea what's going on in there in terms of that sewage treatment plant. No one wants to live next door to a smelly, toxic, it's unbelievably bad. And so there's a whole list of questions there that I think need to be answered there, because as you look through the safety sheets for the hydrated lime and for the methanol, they're supposed to have I have washes there. They're supposed to have showers here because this is some toxic stuff that they're dealing with there. You just don't leave it laying out there like that. And accessible to people too as well. Kids can get in there. It's just, but just read through those things because those are answers that all need to be answered. The DEQ, someone has to be there on that site monitoring that stuff to find out what's going on in there. Okay.
Okay.
The last page that I want to draw your attention to is the critical habitat for the spotted frog. Okay, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but we care deeply about the river. We care deeply about the forest. And when you look at this, they got that dump site right down next to the wetlands. And someone has to walk down that road and look and see what's going on there. It's unbelievable that this can be happening next door to us. And we've tried to, on many occasions, we've tried to mediate the situation with them, met with resistance every time. We've tried to be a good neighbor. We're a good neighbor to the people down here in Bend because we clean the river out, the Little Deschutes River. We monitor it. We try to keep it clean because that water comes down in here as it flows down to the big Deschutes. We try to be a good neighbor. These people, you need to go on that site and take a look.
Dr. Dandona, thank you. Thank you for your testimony, and we will get copies of your documents.
Thank you. Here, Hallie, I have one for you.
Stephen, is anyone online on Zoom that wants to testify now in opposition? Karen. Okay, Karen. Karen, you're available to speak now. Karen, you need to identify yourself, please, for the record. And unmute.
Unmute. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. My name is Karen Jenkins. I live on 17305 Scop Drive, which is just to the north of Thousand Trails. And I would just like to add my concerns about the stewardship of the property. As mentioned by the previous commenters, I agree that garbage dump is horrendous. And 2 days ago, I poked my head into one of the decaying camper trailers sitting there, and there are a dozen or more red plastic containers, the kinds you see in doctor's office and hospitals, filled with used needles. I am not exaggerating. That was there 2 days ago. Someone needs to go look at this dump site. It is a toxic hazard. What if kids get into that? Anyway, that's an example of the type of property owners we're dealing with here. And I have a lot of concerns about the elk migration routes. I have concerns about the drainage fields. All of that needs to be taken into consideration before they are granted carte blanche to add additional sites because they can't take care of what they've got. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for your testimony. Stephen, is anyone else raising their hand? No one else? Okay. So it seems that
Madam Chair, I don't think we called for any agencies today. I
Oh,
don't know if
sorry.
there's any, but just to make sure. Yeah.
Any agencies in the room, you're actually allocated more time. Any agencies online? No agencies online. Okay,
So then applicant has their rebuttal opportunity.
all right, so
Again, for the record, Ken Katzroff. It sounds like we have some response that we'll be making in writing. Two quick notes I'll say is that the waste treatment facility is a DEQ permitted facility. Important. Second thing is that with regards to wood piles and whatnot, it's my understanding that it gets removed every 2 years. And so that's standard maintenance that we do. But We'll certainly be providing a written response to the other comments as well as the submittal that was made this morning. I would probably request a 2-week open record period. That's my preference. Assuming that's, yep, 2 weeks would be our preferred. And then a standard 7/7 if that's what the board's pleasure is.
To go to some of your rebuttal comments, so it's a DEQ permitted septic facility. Can you review for us kind of what the inspection regime and kind of whether there's monitoring data associated with that? This is not a single household domestic septic system. This is a institutional system.
Yeah, so it's not actually septic at all, but so we'll provide details in writing with regards to all of that. I can't speak off the cuff on it. I'd rather provide written comments.
Okay. Well, it would be great within that to kind of review for us kind of what kind of essentially water quality monitoring and compliance is required associated with that permit.
Understood, but Mr. Gonzalez might have.
Yeah, I'd like to speak on the wastewater treatment system we've got there. It's not a septic system, it's a treatment system. We do have a private entity, a third party that actually operates it for us. He basically looks at it on a monthly basis, and then we have reporting to do to the county every quarter. And I'm sure our water system is maintained the same way.
But we'll provide more details in writing.
I mean, given the location of this facility, I don't believe that. I believe you would need a Goal 11 exception to put in a full sewer system. So you've got something that's not septic, but is providing some kind of wastewater treatment.
We'll provide you all the records.
Okay.
Any comments on the waste in RVs? Is that part of the operation and or disposal path, or is that unsanctioned activity? I guess is the question. So we're seeing it in the woods all over the public lands right now. So I'm wondering, has the property lost track of being able to stay on top of this, and is this unsanctioned activity or not?
I'm not sure I can answer that question.
Yeah, you can.
What I will say is that it's not our interpretation of this development agreement that it sanctions code violations. In fact, all it says is that what's currently developed is allowed. That doesn't mean that there's not other code violations or couldn't be other code violations established. So I just want to be clear on that.
Well, and that's a good point here. So I mean, if we're going to take some moment, we're going to focus on this property right now, which we just did. So yeah, I mean, if we're acknowledging that there's actions that could be responded to that come to light from this process and maybe outside this process, yeah, let's clarify that also.
Right. Understood.
Yeah, and I mean, particularly for the benefit of folks who came to testify today, it would be great to have the community development department kind of review for us the pathways for code compliance action. I mean, it does. I'm not sure whether people have filed formal code complaints about some of the concerns that have been raised today. But if CDD could explain to people what happens when formal code complaints are filed, and then also if there could be some explanation of you're not. This to be clear again, this development agreement, kind of formalizing this development agreement, is not approving specific land use developments. If there were to be specific land use developments that proceeded after this development agreement was formal or kind of rememorialized, there would be a detailed land use review processes through site plan review. And so it'd be great to have the community development department explain for the public the opportunities or requirements to address any code complaints prior to that site plan approval.
Can I make one? I think that's great. I would make one quick note, which is 2220-015 also precludes later approval of a site plan, for example, if there's existing code violations that don't resolve it. So there's already that protection in place also.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry. There's a Deschutes County Code provision, which is 2220-015, that essentially precludes future land use approval on property that has code violations unless it resolves the code violation. So if we were to come in with a site plan, for example, and there were still significant code violations that were not resolved, then that couldn't be approved without resolution of those issues.
That's what I was asking, and that's fine if you want to explain it, but I was also asking our community development.
Apologies.
Are there code violations?
So currently, there do not appear to be any ongoing or unresolved code violations on the property to the county's knowledge. And to Commissioner Chang's point, the community, we have a code compliance division within community development. People will need to submit a formal complaint through our website to document if they believe there's a violation. Our code compliance team reviews the request, coordinates with planning, building, on-site wastewater to verify if there is or is not a violation. And again, then coordinates with the property owner to resolve that violation, and then other processes can extend from there. Fines, hearings. But there is a process for folks to formally make the county, aware of a violation through our code enforcement, code compliance division. And then I did confirm with our on-site wastewater manager, Todd Cleveland, that DEQ does have their own complaint process. So if, again, related to specifically a DEQ facility, they have a process on their website if people believe there's a violation to the operating permit for a specific wastewater facility.
And Hallie, just to make it really easy for people, can you give us the website?
Oh yeah,
or
absolutely.
the web page for where people can find the code compliance division?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's deschutes.org/CD. Is our community development page. And then on the left-hand side, there's a code enforcement drop-down menu. And I can even share my screen if folks, I don't think I can right now, but yeah, www.deschutes.org/CD. And again, it's code enforcement tab. Let me get my screen up here. Bear with me. Be coming up here in just a minute. So again, here's the CDD homepage. Here on the left-hand side, I'm sorry, it's small for some folks in the audience, code enforcement. And at the bottom is the form that you would complete.
Thank you.
And you cannot do that anonymously then, is that correct? You have to put your name in.
Correct. You have to put your name in. Once a case is resolved, the complaining party, that becomes public information, their name.
Okay.
Yeah.
But since some folks came today to give public comment and provide all their contact information, it's not private anymore anyway at this point. But just so to recap for people, and interpret what we just discussed. At the point where a specific land use development application came in, in this case, this site plan review came in, that would be a moment where essentially to consider that application, consider approving those developments, we would need to, the applicant would need to have a clean record. Code violations, would need to have been addressed. And the process of of kind of putting potential code violations on the radar screen for the county is through this code compliance process, which you can initiate now and which for which you don't have to necessarily wait until the applicant is applying for a development to get resolution. When you submit a code complaint, you get on the list to have an issue investigated, and we're a little bit staff constrained. There's capacity constraints in code compliance, but they will get to all complaints that are filed and review them.
Yes, Will.
For the record, your planning manager, Will Groves. I just wanted to clarify a little bit that the code enforcement process with regard to land use isn't quite as tidy as you characterized it. We have sections of our code that specify what happens when there is an adjudicated violation. And so there can be a mismatch between neighbors might have a variety of complaints about a property that may in fact be valid, but are in the process of code enforcement investigating those in the order that they're expected to be processed. So our land use code only hitches on adjudicated violations. So there can be circumstances, and there are with some regularity, where there are things that may or may not actually be violations. They've been alleged, they've been filed to the system, but they don't by themselves stop the land use process. So I could speak at some length about this. It's a little bit confusing, and there's some board history associated with it, but just noting it isn't as simple as that the property needs to be cleaned for an application to be processed.
I do have a question about those slash piles. Who would make the rule that it would be every 2 years? Where would that come? Do you know, Will?
It'll be interesting to see if the applicant can find anything in the prior decisions. It may be that was agreed upon as some sort of waste management. Outside of that, we would be talking likely to the county forester about management of slash piles. Certainly, you can imagine if a landowner or other use outside of this development agreement was making large slash piles that were a hazard, that there would be procedures for identifying that. And to the extent that they were included as part of a site plan, we would be talking to the fire department, for example, if that was a lawful way to manage woodland debris.
Okay, thank you.
Stephanie Marshall, Senior Assistant Legal Counsel. I'm glad that you came up, Will, to touch on that nuance between alleged violations and adjudicated violations. We've had frequent discussions about that, not with respect to this application, but in other contexts. And the other thing that I wanted to note, Holly covered it really well, how the process is, but once that complaint is submitted to code enforcement, they assign the file, they investigate, they go out to the property to investigate, and that's the initial determination as to whether it's founded or unfounded. And then there are several processes that follow. Someone mentioned staffing issues right now. I can't speak any further on that, but certainly having something to act on, having a complaint to act on is the first step.
I guess I would just encourage anyone who's confused after all of that to catch one of these folks after this agenda item, to ask them more about how to start and what will happen at what point in the process.
I support the 14, 7, and 7 open record period.
Okay. Mr. Chang, will you support that?
That's fine.
1477. Okay, so
I'll move to close the oral portion of the hearing and leave the written record open for 2 weeks with 7 and 7 following.
Second.
any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you, commissioners, and I'll just briefly go over open record period deadlines here on the screen. So 2-week open record. First period is considered the new evidence and testimony, concluding next Wednesday, October 2nd at 4 p.m., followed by a rebuttal period, concluding Wednesday, October 9th at 4 p.m. Again, all submittals need to be received by the county server or in person at the Community Development Department by 4 p.m. on the date of the deadline. All submittals should be sent directly to myself. My email.
Dates were slipped by a 2-week period. So the 9th would be the open record, new evidence and testimony.
14 and then 7/7.
Oh, okay. I must have misheard the applicant. I thought he said total of 14 days.
2-week
That-
period.
To leave the open record open for 2 weeks.
Okay, so so the first open record period is a 2-week.
For the-
followed-
Yep.
Okay. Let me adjust that. So followed by a 7-day.
Then the 16th.
Yeah, okay. So for a total of 3 weeks, 21 days. Okay. Again, so
We're still in October. We're not in December.
that's true.
We're in the right month.
Okay, and again, just a reminder for folks, we can't download any record items from a cloud service device, or Google shared drive or anything like that. So please attach, documents as a PDF, to emails. Again, 4 p.m. is the date of the deadline that all items must be received on this open record days. And if there's any other questions, again, this will be updated on the project website on the record page. And then I'll upload the items received today to the record as well.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
I mean, if I can just say one more thing about this before we wrap up today. Just to make it really clear for the community, this specific application is about memorializing what was agreed to, like the vision, the big picture vision for the project that was agreed to decades ago. This is not a process to approve specific new development that's going to occur. That will have a land use review process. And I'm not sure that this is, if people are concerned that there are code violations on this property, I'm not sure if this process, of reviewing and either approving or not approving this development agreement is the right kind of place to get at those code concerns. Absolutely, the first step in getting at code concerns is to contact code compliance and file a violation, or file a complaint. So I hope that makes sense to people. The chair is the only one who's allowed to kind of allow people to make further comments or ask questions.
Right. So I don't think we will today. We have 2 weeks, and I apologize if you weren't given enough time in order to prepare for this, but yeah, we did hear you today, and you weren't restricted to 3 minutes. So thank you so much for coming in. And you will have 2 weeks. So this is good. Thank you. Thank you, Hallie. Is it okay not to do a lunch recess now and to go ahead? Are we all good? Okay. Is that unanimous? Kim and Whitney said yes.
Back.
Yeah, Christie's here. Okay, any other items?
Yeah, I got a little updates real quick. Yesterday, I was able to go to Salem and attend a couple of the committee meetings. At 8:30 in the morning was Joint Committee on Information Management Technology. So that, as I say, I've mentioned in the past, the SIEC committee I'm involved in. It was very valuable to be there, meeting Terrence Woods, State Chief Information Officer. Sean McSpadden is the committee staff that helps with this committee. And I was there with the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Oregon also. Following that, though, was a House Interim Committee on Housing and Homelessness. So City of Bend was there, Amy Fraley talking about their future funding needs to kind of keep going with the existing facilities that they've opened recently. There was also a discussion about applying UGB expansion. Eric Kanzler was there for the City of Bend. So a couple of City of Bend updates in front of the legislative committees yesterday. Saw a lot of folks in the hall, our sitting legislators. Doug Riggs was there, and we were able to connect with some of the legislators for a follow-on visit to Central Oregon for COIC, the COCO, water, transportation, Core 3. So there, I was able to kind of go down a list of folks that he thought would be optimal, and I went to some offices and spoke to legislators about that topic also. And then last night, I was able to attend the Travel Oregon dinner at the Canita Resort. Started at 7 o'clock, so it got to be a long day after that. I got home, dropped the rig here off about 10:30 last night.
Say midnight.
Yeah, I know, it was late. But it was really good to be there. That was Travel Oregon Commission, plus their staff, the tribal representatives, Warm Springs, and their staff at the Canita facility were just wonderful last night. Got a tour of the facility. And so a couple notes. They've got 20 private soaking tub cabanas. They've got 7 pools, different temperatures, starting for with the kids to adult soaking pools. They have an ice bath. It's open year round, and they have RV facilities also. So they're looking to kind of load balance the year by having people come throughout the year. So that's the message that we received last night. Is obviously they have their high season, but and it's going to be open with hot water all year long from their natural springs there. So come on down to Canita and soak in the hot tubs.
Okay. Mr. Chang, did you have anything?
One thing I would share is that the commissioner exchange with commissioners from Clatsop and Wasco counties will happen on Monday and Tuesday next week. I've got a pretty packed agenda itinerary for them while they're here. But I wanted to offer that if my fellow commissioners are interested in connecting with those commissioners, visiting commissioners, we will have, I've planned lunch between 12 and 1 in Bend and between 12 and 1 in Redmond on Monday and Tuesday respectively. So those would be, possible opportunities to intersect the groups. I don't necessarily want to public notice the entire itinerary, because we're running around a lot, and it would be really difficult to kind of make the tour available to the general public or a bunch of media. But we could conceivably do the lunch periods, or you could come join and I could leave for lunch, or something like that, if either of you are interested in meeting those other commissioners.
Thanks for the invitation. So
I also suggested to them, one of them said, well, I really want to see you all in session. And I said, well, if you see us in session, you can stay till Wednesday and just come visit. So
stay till Wednesday. AOC District 2 meeting on Monday.
Right, in Lakeview. So yeah, I'll have to look at my Tuesday schedule and see what it looks like.
So I'm going to go to Lakeview. I'll be down there for that.
Yes, I have to go and see Pendleton.
What's that?
My horse lives in Lakeview.
Pendleton's the other side of the state.
No, my horse that his owner is in south of Lakeview, so I want to go see him. So if I can possibly get up in here earlier. Okay, so we did have a Sisters Vision meeting yesterday morning, and the great news was I brought up the ice skating rink, and Carrie from the City of Sisters followed me, and they're actually doing an analysis, and they do have 3 acres in the Woodlands for the City of Sisters to do something on. So trying to get some life to a family style ice skating rink in Sisters. And then I did send pictures to our lobbyist about the slash piles that I've been driving through on BLM property, and they've been there for quite a considerable amount of time. And I haven't heard back yet from Doug on why they haven't gotten rid of them, but they've been there for several years. So a bit of a mess. I believe anything from administration?
Just following up on a couple requests from individual commissioners for letters of support for full board consideration. So Commissioner Chang had reached out about a letter of support for the giving plate, and Commissioner Adair, it looks like you had a request related to a letter of support for Clear Alliance.
Mhm.
Jen is working on drafts of both those letters, and they should come to the board next week for consideration.
Okay, and everyone, please think positive thoughts. Renee is missing her Aussie puppy. And yeah, I think it's on like the second day. So, and she is one of the first people to always thank the county for their donations. And in fact, yesterday, the county was thanked several times in Sisters for all the funding we have done for various projects. So, yes, I thought that was really sad. You can't, it's a 20-pound mini Aussie. So everyone hope that dog gets home. So that sounds good. So we'll get those back soon then. Next week? Okay, great. All right, anything else, Kim? Are we good to go into executive?
Do executive? Okay.
Yes, if that's okay. Christie's here.
Then let me do the announcement before we go out. The Deschutes County Board of Commissioners will now convene an executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660. Specific authorization for this executive session is ORS 192.660 subsection 2E, which allows the board to meet in executive session in order to discuss real property negotiations. Designated staff and the media are allowed to remain during the executive session. However, the media may only report that the board met in executive session and the identified basis for meeting in executive session. Recording devices are not permitted. No final decisions will be made in executive session, and at the conclusion of the session, we will open the doors and invite the audience to return to the meeting.
Okay, so now we're in Yes, reconvening. Christy, please proceed as we just discussed with this executive.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. There being no further business, I believe our next meeting will be next Wednesday. Must be like October 2nd or something. So we will have our meeting starting at 9 a.m. next Wednesday. Thank you very much.